Part 113. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 1158. Teleportation Array Activated. Following Master's command, a large number of treasures were thrown into the Sun battleship, including countless rare treasures, which made many players feel the wealth of Kimen for the first time. As a large amount of vitality was injected into the teleportation beacon, a huge teleportation gate was torn apart out of thin air. Boom! Before the battleship rushed in, everyone saw that on the other side of the portal, it was already dark and huge meteorites were falling and hitting the ground. This couldn't help but raise the heartstrings of everyone. The middle battlefield is the base camp set up by all forces. The most intense battlefield is the upper battlefield, which has become a sea of blood. I just didn't expect that they had just entered the middle battlefield, and it would be so lively here. Just when the battleship rushed out of the portal, the strong smell of blood was already hitting his face. Before everyone could react, a bloody rain suddenly fell from the sky. Dad, Dad! Blood rain splashed on the shield of the Sun battleship. Every drop of blood was as heavy as a cannonball, causing the battleship to teeter. Turn left. Su Tong served as the commander of the battleship, commanding the soldiers on the battleship to quickly change direction. At the same time, we will increase investment in the vitality furnace and activate the defensive talismans on the Sun battleship. For a moment, a pale golden shield rose up around the battleship, blocking the dense rain of blood from the battleship and forcing it out of the sea of blood. But before everyone could take a breath, Su Tong's eyes suddenly became sharp. Use the vitality furnace to push up, quickly. Everyone was confused about what Su Tong was doing. They shouldn't leave the battlefield quickly at this time. Why were they still rushing up? Although these players were confused, Ge Zhou and other soldiers never hesitated at Su Tong's orders. The signal was quickly transmitted to the battleship's cabin, and the two soldiers quickly opened the handbrake in front of them. Jingle bell! The iron cable on the winch fell rapidly, and the cabin armor below the battleship unfolded, revealing the spout of the vitality furnace. The huge thrust quickly pushed the battleship upwards. The huge impact caused the battleship to rise straight up, causing many players to almost fall to the ground. Hoo-hoo! Just when the thick black clouds in front of them were pushed away, everyone saw darkness. Endless mountains fell from the sky, and the warships almost passed through the gaps in the mountains. What is that? Why is there such a big mountain here? Everyone was lying on the edge of the battleship, staring at the huge mountain that was falling rapidly in front of them. It wasn't until the battleship rose higher and they gradually saw the entire mountain clearly that they suddenly discovered that it was not a mountain at all, but a severed arm. Hiss! Looking at the fallen arm, everyone felt their heads going numb. If they weren't looking down from the battleship, they wouldn't even be able to tell it was an arm because it was so big. One finger stretched for dozens of miles, and the entire arm fell from the clouds, like a mountain bearing down on top, hitting the earth. With a rumbling explosion on the ground, all the mountains and rivers were smashed to pieces by the arm. At this moment, countless living beings will be wiped out and endure this disaster. It's so dangerous. Just when someone came back to their senses, their legs suddenly felt weak. Who could have imagined that this battlefield would be so terrifying? If Su Tong hadn't commanded the battleship to rush upward, ordinary players like them would have died without even knowing how they died after rushing in. Roar! Above the 9 heavens, there were roars like those of lions. When everyone looked up, their faces turned pale with fright. I saw that the sky above my head had turned into a sea of blood. Various rare and exotic animals, including white tigers, flying lions, unicorns, and flying dragons, fight in mid-air. When they saw a divine beast being slapped by a man so hard that its skull exploded and its bones were shattered, no one even dared to look at the man, for fear that the other person would shift his target to their side. Turn left, 3 o'clock ahead, vitality cannon ready. However, Su Tong's words almost made many players curse. Is this an opponent they can defeat? Even if you want to bully others, we have to pick on those who are weak. However, when they thought that Su Tong was their leader, they could only swallow back the curses that came to their lips, praying in their hearts that Su Tong would never act recklessly. Is Su Tong messing around? Well, he's really messing around. As soon as he entered the battlefield, Su Tong used the Kinkin to see the dense lines of destiny in the sky. The fate lines of most of them have shown the gray color of death. But there are many lines with several different colors. For example, the man in front of him punched a mythical beast and smashed the unicorn with his palm. The opponent's body was flashing with a bloody red light. There was a single eye on his forehead, and his face was covered with weird silver stripes. The weirdest thing was that he was wearing a blue and white striped hospital gown, with the words L City 5th People's Hospital written clearly on the back. If the director of the hospital knew that someone helped them put the advertisement in front of the gods, I wonder if he would be very happy. Of course, the other party is obviously not here to advertise. The fist stained with blood became more and more fierce. The man was like a madman. Facing the attack of the mythical white tiger, one sided away, but the other hand suddenly grabbed its tail in the palm of his hand. With a shake of his palm, it turned out to be tear off the white tiger's tail from the root and use it as a whip. The white tiger whined in pain, but the man seized the opportunity and whipped it to pieces with a tiger whip. It's extremely brutal and makes people shudder to see it. But at this time, the battleship's vitality cannon had been fully charged, and the muzzles of the cannons fired dazzling bright lights at the man. Boom 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 boom. In an instant, the man's figure was swallowed up by the energy storm exploded by the energy cannon. Under the strong light, all the players on the battleship suddenly showed joy. They did not expect that the power of this battleship was so strong. But before they could get happy, they saw a pair of palms protruding from the bright light, tearing apart the energy storm, and fixing their eyes on the sun battleship like wild beasts. At this moment, everyone's heads and feet were cold, and their whole body muscles felt stiff in place, and even their blood was cold. Ah! The man let out a strange scream and rushed towards the battleship. I come. Gu Zibai walked towards the deck, ready to take action himself, but was stopped by Su Tong. Don't worry, let's tease him. Su Tong examined the man in front of him. He must be one of the patients in the 5th hospital, but he didn't know why he suddenly had such terrifying power. I believe there should be more than one such terrifying guy, and I just took this opportunity to understand the extent of the strength of these guys. Withdraw. Su Tong said withdraw, and all the soldiers on the battleship responded quickly. Like a clockwork machine, they quickly changed direction, pushed the winch, and closed the battleship hatch. A large number of treasures were thrown away in an orderly manner. Enter the furnace of resentment to increase the power of the battleship. It is said that at such a speed, no matter how neat and fast they cannot escape the opponent's pursuit. But when Su Tong's eyebrows flickered with a golden light of longing, the power of time surrounded the entire battleship. As Su Tong's thoughts moved, the next moment the time around the battleship was controlled by Su Tong, and it was going beyond normal time. Of 10 times rapid circulation. As the saying goes, the spring rain is silent. Everyone on the battleship, except the eldest princess and Gu Zibai, noticed the change of time, but no one else felt anything. But in the eyes of the outside world, the speed of the battleship suddenly began to accelerate to an incredible level. Even though that big man was very capable, he could only watch as the battleship quickly retreated and threw him far away. He was so angry that he yelled and was about to turn around and leave. Su Tong ordered to hit him with the vitality cannon again. Bang 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 bang. This time, the vitality cannon on the Sun battleship was fully fired, and the dazzling light blasted the man to pieces in an instant. Although this can't really hurt him, it's like someone throwing a stone on the roadside. But there are many stones, and even if a man is not dead, his skin will still peel off. Now the man went crazy and dived towards the battleship like a wild animal, but Su Tong still flew the kite calmly. This weird scene left all the players scratching their heads for a moment, and suddenly they felt that the man who made them afraid didn't seem so scary after all. It wasn't until Su Tong felt that it was almost done that he signaled to Gu Zibai, "Let's do it." Gu Zibai had been waiting for this moment for a long time. After absorbing the thoughts from the four gods of Yuand, he not only recovered from his injuries, but his strength also improved to another level. He jumped down, a blazing fairy light burst out, and his blood, like a vast ocean, it hit the man with his fist. Boom! The huge collision sound sounded like thunder. The entire void exploded. The man watched helplessly as his arm was torn apart under Gu Zibai's fist, and the muscles and bones were separated. There was a strange color in his eyes, which was soon replaced by endless madness. Ah! Blood rained down and he suffered heavy injuries, which instead aroused the murderous nature in his heart. The creatures he killed manifested themselves in the sea of blood and started to kill towards Gu Zibai. But Gu Zibai was unhurried, absorbing the thoughts of the four gods of Yuand, and coupled with his body with the ultimate martial arts, he was already a master of martial arts, and all methods came from his heart. The golden fist was raised and turned into a blazing fire dragon. One punch evaporated the sea of blood in front of him, and then the second punch directly pierced the chest of the man in front of him. At this time, the man also noticed something was wrong. His eyes finally recovered from the madness, he turned around and turned into a streak of blood to escape. This blood light is extremely fast and can penetrate time and space in an instant. Even if Gu Zibai has the power to reach the sky, it will be difficult to stop it. However, Gu Zibai couldn't stop him from leaving, but Su Tong could. At the moment when the other party turned into blood and fled, Su Tong's figure actually came from the future, blocked in front of him, raised his hand. In the meantime, the surrounding time solidified, sealing it in the time in front of it. "I don't want to die, I just recovered, I don't want to die." The blood light was still flashing, and the man's face emerged in the blood light, and wisps of blood-red thoughts burst out into hysterical screams. Tianyu revived and summoned the thoughts of the dead god wandering in the world, and resurrected them through the bodies of these patients. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for them. Once they die again, they literally vanish into thin air. But Su Tong doesn't care about you. He raised his hand and slapped it to disperse his thoughts. De Ya flew out with the fairy furnace in his hand, and the next moment he put it into the fairy furnace. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 1159. All the players on the battleship were dumbfounded. Some people turned their heads and discovered that Su Tong was still standing on the deck. Looking back again, Dai returned to Su Tong's hall with the fairy stove in her arms. "Why are there two Su Tong?" Everyone looked at each other repeatedly, and after confirming that the two of them belonged to the same person, their minds were suddenly a little exhausted. It's no wonder that Su Tong's methods are too advanced for these players. Before mastering the law of time, he could use an inch of time to escape from the future. Although he only advanced his figure by a few seconds, now that he has mastered the law of time, what he can improve is not just as simple as 1 second. His thoughts can exist in the present, past, and future. This is the terrifying power of time. As Su Tong put away his thoughts, everyone discovered that Su Tong's figure outside the battleship gradually disappeared. Many people thought it was just a wisp of Su Tong's clone. But what more people care about is not this, but they are shocked by Su Tong's power. They used to think that the top players were those with the title of God, such as Buelyuan, Yan Zioki, Kong Xiaozi, and the others. But now, Su Tong's Kimen has refreshed their understanding again and again with practical actions. It made them realize two things. It turns out that the gods are not as invincible as they thought. Even if they are like ants, they can still contribute their own strength with this battleship. At least what this battleship just showed level, giving them a new understanding of the Sun battleship. And this is exactly what Su Tong wants to achieve. Once on the battlefield, a part of his thoughts will stay on the Sun battleship to bless the Sun battleship with the power of time, allowing these players to give full play to their remaining energy. Of course, not only that, Su Tong will also improve their strength in the shortest possible time. Fantasy Rubik's Cube, lots of blessing oil. It's free for them to use. Including the god of death who was thrown into the immortal furnace by him at this moment, Su Tong estimated that this should extract thousands of thoughts. Each of these players can share more than a dozen thoughts, and they can also greatly reduce their thoughts in a short period of time. Strength increases. Some people may think that Su Tong is too generous in doing this. But now is not the time to care about personal gains and losses, not to mention, these players know very well that the moment they board the battleship, they are destined to die on this battlefield. For these players who are ready to die in battle at any time, if Su Tong is stingy, it will be a bit out of order. What's more, he himself has never been stingy with anyone. Whether it's members of his own team, non-team members, or even former opponents, Su Tong never cares about gains and losses. Whoosh! At this time, a black shadow fell from the sky, blocking the front of the Sun battleship. It was a white deer. I saw the white deer transforming into a fairy, bowing slightly to the people on the battleship. May I ask which immortal came to save me just now? Su Tong stepped forward and looked at Bailu. When Bailu saw Su Tong, he was startled, then turned around and left without saying a word. Hey, why is this bitch leaving? According to the script, shouldn't it be a promise of your body? Gao Zhou immediately complained when he saw this. But as soon as he said these words, he felt a chill on his back. When he looked back, he saw Aimei and the eldest princess staring at him. I want to cut someone's gaze, but I can't hide it at all. The frightened Gao Zhou turned pale and hurriedly gave himself a big mouth. Just kidding, I mean, at least I want to say thank you. Seeing Gao Zhou shut his bad mouth, the two women withdrew their murderous eyes. The other party left in a hurry, and Su Tong knew the answer in his heart. After all, he was a wanted criminal in heaven and a confirmed rebel. However, Su Tong never expected the other party to thank him for anything, and he did not simply want to save them. However, just as Su Tong was about to signal everyone to leave here quickly and meet up with Du Ziren, the dark clouds parted in the sky, and a mass of blackbirds and animals rushed towards Su Tong. I'll go and repay that girl's kindness with revenge. When Gao Zhou saw this, he immediately became furious. He cursed and rolled up his sleeves to get ready to do it. Other players also showed angry expressions. They knew that this god was not a good thing, but they didn't expect to turn against him so quickly. However, what is surprising is that these mythical beasts did not attack the battleship, but instead turned into human forms and stood in a row. The fairy who had just left in a hurry, with sweat still on her forehead, bowed to Su Tong and saluted, "My dear, please forgive me. It happened suddenly and I didn't have time to report it. I just went back and called these companions here. Please forgive me." Su Tong shook his head and was not angry about this. He just looked at the figures transformed by these mythical beasts in front of him, and with a thought, he roughly thought of their purpose. You are here just to let me help you unlock the divine brand. Exactly. Not long ago, Master Longxiu came back and told us that the one who defies heaven has reappeared in the world, and asked me to come and join him as soon as possible. Unexpectedly, I met the immortal again. The fairy looked excited and spoke a little awkwardly. What about Master Longxiu? Su Tong didn't expect that Master Longxiu would work so hard and spread his story in such a short time. It seemed that he was really embarrassed to ask him for labor fees again. Seeing Su Tong mentioning Master Longxiu, Fairy Bailu and others looked at each other and their eyes turned red. He fell. He was caught the next day and was escorted to the immortal killing platform. Before his death, he cursed the 5 elders of the 5 directions, the emperor's mother. Su Tong was startled, but he never expected that the result would be so quick. After being stunned for a few seconds, Su Tong took a deep breath, summoned thousands of thoughts, and turned into countless clones to unlock the divine brand for these divine beasts. When the divine mark dissipated, Fairy Bailu and others were all excited and jumped for joy. They are the divine beasts that are blessed by heaven and earth, and thanks to the blessings of heaven and earth, they have acquired the method of cultivation, accumulated virtues, and performed good deeds, and they have also had some names and taboos in the human world. But in the end, they were treated as pets, slaves, and mounts by the gods in the heavens, branded, and kept in cages. When the god of death invades, they are even forced to participate in this level of fighting. If they resist even a little bit, they will have no way to survive and no way to die. How could they not be happy now that they had finally broken free from the shackles? Even though they knew that they would not be able to survive the battle between the gods, they were still willing to die as long as they were free for a moment. Please forgive us for not being able to follow the immortal. In the other world, there are still companions who need our rescue. Although they sacrifice their lives for the gods, they can't help themselves. We can't just die without saving them. The fairy bowed to Su Tong and confessed. Hey, it's voluntary labor again. Su Tong sighed inwardly, but when it came to this matter, he was too shameless to ask for labor fees from others. After thinking for a moment, dozens of thoughts flew out, but they turned into little bits of strange white light. Su Tong stretched out his palm, activated Yanshi soul searching bone, grabbed these thoughts in the palm of his hand, and squeezed them casually. A talisman shining with white light appeared in the palm of his hand. This is seeing Ziju. Su Tong used Yan Shu to make a talisman and handed it to Fairy Bailu. As long as she activates the talisman, she can unlock the divine restrictions on other divine beasts and immortals. Bailu thanks the immortal on behalf of the other immortal friends. Fairy Bailu bowed heavily and saluted Su Tong, including the mythical beasts behind her. At this moment, all the players on the Sun battleship were moved. The look in Su Tong's eyes became weird. After a while, a player finally came to his senses. Good guy, fight against the local tyrants and divide the fields, this routine. Everyone was startled, and suddenly felt relieved. As expected, Teju had the attitude after all, and strategic thinking was always the magic weapon to win. After bidding farewell to Fairy Bailu, Su Tong immediately turned the Sun battleship around and headed south. He wanted to meet up with Du Ziren as soon as possible. Not only did he want to use Du Ziren's power, but he also wanted to know the detailed plans of the gods. As for whether Du Ziren said it or not, it didn't matter. Anyway, she could directly watch through the thread of his fate. But rushing there won't be a matter of time. Because Du Ziren is not in this world, the battlefield of gods is divided into 3 levels, upper, middle and lower. Each level has 18 horizontal worlds. Du Ziren should be in the southernmost worlds, and Su Tong could only kill him forcefully along the way. While there was still time at this moment, Su Tong came up with an idea to refine the god of death. As expected, Su Tong's idea, which was only 1,000 years old, was divided by Su Tong. After every player obtains these pure and flawless thoughts, it is better to obtain the ultimate treasure. Many players have even achieved significant breakthroughs in strength with the blessing of this thought, reaching at least the level of certified players. Of course, this will definitely backfire and invisibly cut off the possibility of these players reaching another level of strength. But now that we have reached this point, who still cares about this kind of thing? Whether he can live to see the sun tomorrow is a matter of course. Su Tong then took out the fantasy Rubik's Cube and mounted it on the Sun battleship, releasing authority and allowing these players to strengthen it. What Su Tong did was tantamount to making all the players tremble with excitement. They have no shortage of script points. When they completed tasks for the gods before, the gods generously rewarded them with script points on a large scale. It wasn't until they were driven to the battlefield of the gods that they suddenly discovered that everything was a scam. Now they have a huge script in their hands and have no idea how to digest it. With the dream Rubik's Cube and the idea Su Tong gave them, they can improve their strength to another level in a short period of time. However, when everyone started to strengthen with great interest and looked at the cost of strengthening, everyone looked at Su Tong with resentment in their eyes and silently cursed in their hearts, you, this profiteer, where is your conscience? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 1160. Sorry, I got stuck as a result. I deleted the first update and rewrote it, so I updated it at the stuck point. I posted it first and then revised it, so the two chapters were combined into one. No wonder they think so. Who made Lo Jinfang increase the price too high? After comparison, some players found that, good guy, I was a big injustice before. But there is nothing we can do about it. Who makes this an exclusive monopoly business? After thinking about it, the enhancement levels of the enlightenment pills, flying papers, and pills sold by Su Tong were not low. Compared with the cost of enhancement, they were still a fair price. Well, they obviously know nothing about the strengthening costs of these things, otherwise they might be tempted to strangle Su Tong at this time. All the way south, constantly traveling horizontally and teleporting across borders. When crossing the barrier, the scene in front of me was shocking. There were chaotic battles everywhere. Not only the gods from the east, but also the gods from ancient countries such as Greece, India, Egypt, etc. were involved. And what these gods are fighting against are the dead gods who were resurrected by the youngest. These dead gods are different from the youngest, Tai, the old god Stick, and the reverse god. The four of them are the gods of death who finally woke up after sleeping in the underworld for who knows how many years. Protected by special coffins, their bodies did not decay, and their souls and thoughts were preserved. As for these dead gods who were resurrected by the youngest, they have died. There have been too many variables in the long years. Some of the dead gods were killed when they woke up after resuscitation, or their coffins were broken, causing their bodies to rot, and they were still alive. Some simply died inexplicably in the coffin. The youngest uses these patients whose birth dates match theirs as flesh bodies to help them recall their thoughts scattered in the world and be reborn. Although his strength is not as good as before, he still has the power to crush 3 generations of gods. They are so ancient that even if they only have a little thought left, the magical powers they display are extremely terrifying. The patron saints of those small Western countries were completely vulnerable and were ruthlessly crushed and devoured. But there are also many powerful gods who have emerged, such as the power displayed by the Western Holy See, which shocked all forces. It only takes a few red-robed high priests to open the door to heaven and summon endless angels. There is also ancient Buddhism, where the Buddha personally visited, appeared, and preached, and transformed thousands of novices into Buddhas. Perhaps the quality is far from the opponents of these resurrected dead gods, but in terms of quantity, it is a trend of crushing them. The appearance of Su Tong and his party will naturally be noticed by many gods. When some gods saw the Sun battleship, they could not help but have a look of caution on their faces. But when he could clearly see the figures of the players on the battleship deck, his alertness was suddenly gone, and his face showed an angry look instead. A god rushed into the sky with unforgivable anger, raised the wavy scimitar in his hand, and struck at the Sun battleship. In his opinion, the sky is the domain of the gods. These humble tools are not worthy of flying in the sky, let alone tolerate them flying over his head. Bang 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 bang. But before he could get close, the energy cannon, which had been charged for a long time, came down overwhelmingly. Followed by a large number of skills, they came down like a tide. The opponent was just a third-generation god, a god from a small and low-end country. Faced with the overwhelming attacks in front of him, he was immediately beaten to the point of running away with his head covered. The first team follows me up, and the second team presses behind me, up. I saw Gao Zhou raising his arms and jumping off the battleship first. The players followed closely, releasing flying paper to follow, and followed Gao Zhou to hunt the gods. After tasting the various benefits brought by thoughts, these players have become red-eyed. They know that if they want to survive, they must seize every opportunity to hunt down the weaker gods. Only by devouring them and strengthening themselves can they survive. Survive the great war ahead. Su Tong not only agreed with this idea, but also strongly supported it. He used Yan Shu again to turn the Zanziju into talismans and distributed them to these players. With this talisman, their skills or weapons could have the power to kill gods in a short period of time. He also specially asked Gao Zhou to divide these players into two teams. Gao Zhou and Li Bo came to lead the team, and De Ya held the fairy furnace and sat in the rear. This time it was the god's turn to be blinded. His eyes widened and he looked at the players rushing up. He couldn't believe his eyes. Foolish ants, you are asking for your own death. The player who is a tool dares to take action against the gods. This is like a domesticated dog biting back at its owner. This kind of dog has no domestication value and can only be killed and turned into a dish. Just when he was about to use his magical power to turn all these ignorant ants into Huijin, Gao Zhou, who was leading the way, had already taken action. As a corpse immortal, although he has not suddenly realized the power of any law, he still has the ability to challenge the three generations of gods. As soon as he made a move, all kinds of weird curses were thrown down. Some of these curses were researched by Gao Zhou himself and had the bonus of prop cards. Some of them were the ones he had in epiphany after becoming the corpse immortal, and they were the most bizarre and difficult to deal with. Another part comes from the inheritance of witches from the witch clan. The three curses fell together, and even the third-generation gods were a little overwhelmed. When the players behind them saw this, they frantically threw various skills at each other. With the blessing of thoughts, they found that the release of skills was so simple, and they could unleash more than 10 skills in one breath. Bang bang bang. Various skills exploded around this god like a rainstorm. With the blessing of Su Tong's Zhanzi talisman, these skills and weapons, which were never looked upon by the gods, now have the power to hurt him. A player flew forward and slashed down with a big sword in both hands. The blade of the sword flashed with dazzling light, almost splitting his chest. In great pain, the god beat the player into a pulp with a backhand punch, but the injuries on his body were increasing. It's just that the foundation of these players is too weak. Most players still rely on the skills of prop cards and need to wait for a certain cooling time. Fortunately, the second team led by Li Bo had already taken over the battlefield. Li Bo was even better at playing the same tricks than Gao Zhou. This guy directly transformed into the High Priest of Nature, mobilizing the power of thunder from heaven and earth to form a terrifying ocean of thunder. Then various kinds of goo insects were released to harass them. Now the god couldn't resist it. After a while, he had many wounds on his body, and he tried to escape in embarrassment. As a result, they were sniped by players from the second team and beaten to pieces on the spot. Dia, who had been waiting for a long time, saw the fairy furnace and quickly put it in her arms. After the battle, everyone returned to the battleship with excited eyes. Dia handed the immortal furnace to Su Tong and estimated that 800 thoughts could be extracted from it. The quantity and quality were far from the previous death god. But this is already the best result. After all, the opponent is just a third-generation god from a small country, and he is just a cannon fodder on this battlefield. Let Dia be responsible for refining these ideas. Su Tong glanced at these players, and in such a simple battle, they lost nearly 20 people. This was the result of Su Tong's help and Gao Zhou and Li Bo's pressure. If it weren't for these two people as the main force, if it weren't for Su Tong's help, just by relying on these players to rush forward, the casualties would have been more than 20. I'm afraid not even one of them can survive. With the loss of 20 people, these players were particularly excited. Hunting a god was an extremely important boost for them. What's more, they can even share the idea of this god and continue to increase their own strength, which undoubtedly gives them a faint hope. After these players absorbed the idea, they jumped into the next hunt again before they could stop. In every hunt, some players will die, but their strength is also growing visibly to the naked eye. Although this is cruel, it is undoubtedly the best way. For a time, news spread like wildfire about some players hunting gods in the middle battlefield, attracting the anger of many gods. However, the battlefield is too chaotic, and it is not just the players who are killing the gods, but the gods will not let go of this opportunity. As long as they swallow enough gods, they can quickly increase their strength. In fact, everyone is like a drowning person who has fallen into the river. No one can see the direction of the other side, but as long as they step on other people's bodies as much as possible to survive for one more second, there is hope for a second. Whoa! At this time, a deep horn sounded on the battlefield, and the sky in the distance was torn apart by a strong holy light. Su Tong walked onto the deck and looked in the direction of the holy light with his spiritual eyes, and found that a large number of angels were rushing towards this direction. There was an aura that felt familiar to him. No, leave quickly. Suddenly Su Tong noticed something and quickly blessed the battleship with the power of time, causing the fast battleship to turn around and run towards the other side. Finally found you. A golden chariot, surrounded by many angels, descended from the holy light. Everyone looked at it with fear in their hearts. A woman stood on a golden chariot, with 6 pairs of wings flashing with sacred light. The woman's eyes flashed and were locked on the sun battleship, or in other words, locked on Su Tong's body. Michael. One of the 6 ancient seraphs, he is the strongest god among them, and is also known as the once glorious morning star. How could Su Tong not recognize her? The eldest princess almost killed herself when she attracted Lilith and Michael. In order to take away his soul, Michael gave it a feather, which purified his soul. Only then would Lilith decisively give her heart to herself and save her alive. Now that Michael was here in person, it was definitely not just to catch up with him. In fact, the Holy See has repeatedly wanted to let him go to the Vatican, and Su Tong always felt that there was something fishy about it. Therefore, the Holy See has always flaunted its banner, but in my heart I was wary of these birds. Seeing Su Tong trying to escape, Michael frowned, took the reins in his hand, and drove the chariot towards Su Tong and the others. The battlefield made of gold, illuminated by Michael's holy light, shimmered with brilliance, reflecting it like a god in the world. 9 flawless white Pegasus fluttered their wings, and each wave of their wings actually distorted the surrounding time and space. The bright holy light was as strong as a rising sun. Su Tong madly blessed the sun battleship with the power of time, causing the battleship to move almost at a speed that exceeded time. Many gods who were still in the melee did not even notice the battleship. But when Michael arrived in his chariot, under the holy light, those gods quickly evaporated and were purified into ashes in the holy light. Except for the Holy See, the other gods are all pagan gods. They destroy and purify them casually, just like seeing an ant passing by and stepping on it to death. But in the eyes of everyone, this scene only aggravated the resentment against the Holy See. Faster, faster, faster. Su Tong urged Ji Zhou and the others to take out all the energy crystals in the warehouse and put them into the vitality furnace. Although Michael is a 3rd-generation god, his strength is only stronger than that of a 2nd-generation god. Su Tong was not sure that he could kill the opponent now, not to mention that behind Michael was a mighty army of angels. Once they were caught up, it would be troublesome. You still have to run there. Michael's dark blue eyes were locked on Su Tong. Stop and follow me. The Holy See will keep you safe and sound during this catastrophe. Michael's voice came, clear and ethereal. In an instant, many players on the battleship were shaken by her voice. If there is any hope, who is willing to throw himself into this meat grinder and struggle to the death? For a while, many players looked at Sutong, and some even began to hesitate whether to persuade Sutong. After all, Michael had not attacked them until now, he was just chasing behind them on a chariot. In the end, Sutong just glanced at them with a sinister look, and with just one sentence, these players completely gave up their unrealistic thoughts. "This bitch wants me, what does it have to do with you?" As soon as these words came out, the faces of all the players suddenly changed, and when they looked at Michael again, their expressions suddenly showed disgust. As the saying goes, don't worry about scarcity but inequality. People are so realistic, and when life and death are at stake, the people on this boat will not be of the same mind. If Michael was willing to take everyone away, they would naturally be tempted. But if only Sutong is taken away, it will be a disaster for other players. Even if Michael didn't directly purify them as heretics for Sutong's sake, if he left them here, without Sutong's protection, they might not be able to survive even one day. No one dared to think about this idea now, and some players even took the initiative to join Zhou's team and carry energy crystals to speed up the battleship. "Master, how long will it take to break through the boundary and teleport?" Seeing Michael getting closer and closer, Sutong urged in the team channel. To crack the teleportation array, there is a certain cooling time for each use. Master is also speeding up repairs at this moment. It's just Sutong's little thoughts, how could he hide them from Michael? She suddenly gave up on the upper battlefield and came directly to the middle battlefield with her angel army, just to take Sutong away. How could he be allowed to escape so easily? Seeing that Sutong had no intention of stopping, Michael spread his palms. God said, "Don't move." Along with Michael's voice, the surrounding space and time were swallowed up by a strong holy light in an instant. As long as the holy light sweeps across, everything will stop. This is not the power of time, it really makes everything stop. The degree of domineering rules is not even worse than the law of time. It can be said that they are indistinguishable. No matter it is the wind on the grassland, the water in the mountain stream, or even the breeding river crabs, they are unable to make any move. Including everyone on the Sun battleship is no exception. The vitality in the vitality furnace solidified almost instantly, and the battleship suddenly lost all power. Everyone's eyes widened, and they found that their bodies could not make any movement, and their eyes suddenly became frightened. Even Sutong found that he could not move his limbs. Oops! Sutong's heart sank. Just when he was about to activate Sheng Sheng, he suddenly heard Gao Zhou's voice. "If you don't let me move, I won't move. I will move. I can move however I want. The laws of you, a birdman, have nothing to do with me." I saw Gao Zhou standing on the deck with his hands on his hips and yelling, but he was not affected by Michael's power at all. It's no wonder that he is a corpse immortal. He doesn't remember the world and jumps out of the 5 elements. Michael's law can immobilize all things, except Gaucho. Oh, it's not just Gaucho. Crash la la la. The sound of running water rang in everyone's ears. When they looked down, they saw a large amount of black liquid suddenly appearing on the deck. The black water expanded rapidly, covering the gaps in the battleship, causing the battleship to restart operation. The eldest princess kicked Gao Zhou on the butt, kicked him aside, and looked up at Michael in front of her. With a wave of his hand, he summoned endless black water, turning into a giant dragon and crashing towards Michael's carriage. Heresy! Seeing this, Michael pulled out the holy sword from his waist and struck out a sword light burning with holy fire, immediately splitting the black dragon in front of him. But when the black dragons dispersed, they saw that the eldest princess had summoned endless black water, wrapped it around the Sun battleship, forcibly tore open the space barrier in front of her, and escaped directly. Damn it! This scene surprised Michael. She never expected that someone could be immune to the power of her own creation law. What's more, I didn't expect that the other party would have such powerful means and bring an entire battleship to forcefully penetrate the barrier. Space system players all know that the burden of single-player space teleportation is not heavy. If you are more capable, it is not a problem to bring several people to teleport together. But if there are more than 10 people, the difficulty will skyrocket. If there are more than 100, without the assistance of a large teleportation array, it is almost courting death. Not to mention having to bring such a large warship to forcefully penetrate the world barrier. This is a complete joke with everyone's life. Even if the gods want to teleport players, they must build a huge teleportation gate in the exhibition center. But the eldest princess did it. The black water enveloped the battleship and forced its way out of the barrier. In an instant, everyone could see with the naked eye that the surrounding black water was rapidly evaporating. Zhizhizzy. The collision of the barriers caused the battleship to make a harsh friction sound, and everyone could feel the battleship's deck shaking violently. Everyone's heart was raised to their throats. If the battleship fell apart at this time, they would probably be thrown out and torn into pieces by the terrifying space turbulence. Fortunately, the black water summoned by the eldest princess was almost endless. Only when the entire battleship was completely dragged out of the space barrier did everyone heave a sigh of relief. Michael's ability was obviously not enough to cross the boundary. When everyone crossed the boundary barrier, they were already able to move normally. Let's go. Su Tong did not dare to stop at all and immediately accelerated the battleship. At the same time, Master finally repaired the cracking teleportation array. With the injection of a large amount of vitality, the boundary-breaking teleportation array was activated again. The battleship disappeared out of thin air and shuttled sideways again. Perhaps due to the continuous travel across the world, many parts of the battleship could not withstand the pressure and burst. Even with Su Tong's power of time to accelerate, the speed of the battleship is also declining at a speed visible to the naked eye. You shouldn't be able to catch up, right? Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. After all, it was not easy for Michael to continuously cross the barrier with so many angels. However, just when everyone thought they could take a rest first, Su Tong suddenly froze. He raised his head and looked at the clouds above his head. Behind the clouds, 6 pairs of wings shining with golden light gradually became clear. Michael's figure suddenly appeared above all of them, with a hint of anger in his dark blue eyes. He slowly raised his white and flawless fingers and pointed at Su Tong and others. Suddenly, a great sense of crisis enveloped everyone's hearts. It was as if an invisible force hit their hearts, as if everyone was facing a life-or-death trial. God said. The corners of Michael's pink lips were slightly opened, and a dazzling light rippled on his fingertips. Go together. At this moment, Su Tong, Princess Da, Lao Bai, Gao Zhou, and Li Bo all rushed to the sky, ready to give it a try. When Michael saw this, a flash of disdain flashed in his eyes, and he said unhurriedly, "Judgment." The moment the words fell, a scale appeared above everyone's heads. There is a feather at one end of the scale, and at the other end is the shadow of each of their hearts. Everyone looked at the scales blankly, and a feeling of impending disaster spread. And as the scales gradually began to tilt, a huge pressure bound their hearts. According to the teachings of the Holy See, humans are inherently sinful. And these players had been working as cows and horses for the gods before, and none of them had blood stains on their hands. Just waiting for the sound of judgment to fall, these people will all die violently. Even for Su Tong, the best result is that his heart is broken and he can only give up his body. Ahem, on my territory, it seems inappropriate for you to do this. Just when everyone's hearts were about to jump into their throats, an unhappy questioning voice sounded. Just hearing a piercing ringtone, everyone's intuition was in a trance. The scales above their heads were all shattered, and in their place was a book of life and death with their names written on it. Su Tong was also startled. Looking back, he saw a headless carriage approaching from the clouds. Su Tong recognized at a glance whose car it was, the Southern Ghost Emperor, Du Ziren. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 1161. Su Tong couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when Du Ziren appeared. Even a super powerful being like Michael might not be able to do anything to Du Ziren. The other 4 Ghost Emperors of the 5 directions are all one and the same. Only Du Ziren holds the positions of political commissar and regimental leader, and his authority is much higher than that of the other Ghost Emperors of the 4 directions. Being able to do this is definitely supported by strong strength. In fact, just as Su Tong thought, Michael also had a look of fear on his face when he saw Du Ziren's carriage. Du Ziren is definitely a hard worker in the underworld, and all the gods in the 3 realms are aware of his reputation. The gods fought in Gigzu Mountain more than once, competing for Gigzu Mountain. At that time, there was no territory in the underworld. Later, the prince of the palace swept across the underworld, rectified the government, opened the underworld, and guarded the reincarnation, but rarely participated in the struggles of the gods. Until one time, Du Ziren led 1,000,000 yin soldiers from the underworld and rushed into the battlefield, killing all the gods in the sky with their eyelids twitching. Even after the incident, the prince recalled him and severely reprimanded him for leading troops to fight without permission, but the territory was actually conquered. It also created the reputation of Hades. Now, after so many years, Michael met Du Ziren again. It was a lie to say that Michael was not afraid, but it was not true that he was afraid. Hearing this, he pointed at Su Tong. This person has an agreement with me in the west and must return to my paradise in the west. There was a cold snort from the carriage, and Du Ziren's voice came out from the carriage calmly, Su Tong, tell him who you are. Yes. Su Tong walked to the carriage in a serious manner and said, the Yin Kaisi has received the envoy Su Tong to pay homage to the emperor. As soon as these words came out, many players were shocked. They are players, and they can have multiple identities in the script world, and some even become emperors. But these identities are all temporary. In contrast, Su Tong can actually have a professional title in the underworld, which is an incredible treatment. Whether it's reality or a script. The happiness in life is nothing more than saying, there is someone above me. But this happiness is far less interesting than the sentence there is someone below me. After Su Tong revealed his identity as an official in the Yin Cao, Du Ziren's sneer came from the carriage, I'm an official in the Yin Cao, it's not appropriate for you to take me away quietly like this. Besides. Having said this, a golden edict floated out from the carriage. Immediately, the decree unfolded. It was solemn, vast, sacred, and peaceful, and the aura it exuded made people want to bow down. This kind of thing is difficult to imitate. When Su Tong saw this volume of decree, his expression suddenly changed. By the order of Emperor Renzheng Qi Tian of Mount Tai. As Du Ziren began to speak, the handwriting on the decree in front of him was filled with brilliant golden clouds. For a moment, everyone on the battleship knelt on the ground unconsciously. The vast and boundless body of the great emperor has already appeared in his mind. The emperor's majesty is permeated, and the brilliance is lingering, making the heaven and earth appear peaceful and crystal clear. Even Michael was suppressed by this holy power and was unable to move. The divine light of the 6 pairs of wings behind him dimmed, and even breathing felt uncomfortable. She is a 3rd-generation god, but her fighting power is no weaker than that of the 2nd-generation god. However, facing an ancient god of the level of Taishan Fijun, she has no choice but to temporarily extinguish her light and be willing to be a candle. It has been thousands of years since I was founded in the underworld. I have 9 of the 5 ultimate skills, but one is missing and is not perfect. Now I feel the fate of heaven and earth, and I have named Su Tong the Wuji Yuansheng Southern Ghost Emperor, leading the Jiang barbarian ghosts. As Du Ziren's voice fell, the decree shone with dazzling light, then shot through the sky and reflected the 3,000 worlds. In the battlefield of the gods, all forces can see the decree of this prince, and they are all shocked by it. Michael was shaking with anger, but he had no choice but to look at Su Tong and whisper softly. If you return to my heaven, your achievements will be more than that. The kings of the left and right of heaven will be chosen by you, and the 6 angels will personally crown you. Obviously, at this point, Michael could only show his greatest sincerity to seduce Su Tong. But how could Su Tong refuse the benefits in front of him and throw himself into Michael's arms? What's more, my master and master are both in the underworld. The most important thing is that the words on the decree were written by the emperor himself, but the decree itself did not come from the emperor, but from his own master. As early as when Du Ziren took out this decree, Su Tong recognized it at a glance. It was the master's protective treasure, the decree of destiny. Now Su Tong had no chance of refusing. The master's decree of destiny, coupled with the emperor's own handwriting, was both a favor and a hint to Su Tong. To refuse is to deceive the master and destroy the ancestor, and he is not allowed to pick and choose. A decree, with both kindness and power, can only be said to be the emperor's method. Even Su Tong had to accept the defeat. Su Tong raised his hands and took the decree in his palms. In an instant, the golden light on the decree, stamped with the emperor's seal, turned into thousands of colors and enveloped Su Tong's body. Suddenly, Su Tong felt his soul tremble, and a special power was integrated into his soul. This was the benefit brought by the Zhengshen status, which caused the number of his soul to increase instantly. 10,000, 30,000, 60,000, the thoughts of Yuan Shen are growing crazily. The heaven and earth of Su Tong's Dharma form opened up, and the original battle armor receded. He wore a bead-curtain jade crown, a black dragon robe, a 5-clawed golden dragon coiled around him, a jade buckle, golden boots, and a sword at his waist, standing proudly between the heaven and the earth. Among them, he enjoys one of the 5 poles of the underworld, the state of righteousness. Seeing that Su Tong had achieved success, Michael was so angry that he gritted his teeth but had no choice but to do anything. He could only leave a few words to take care of himself and quickly turned around and left. After all, Su Tong has achieved positive results, and together with Du Ziren, if the two of them force her to stay here, although they cannot hurt her at all, it will be a huge disadvantage to the upper battlefield. Moreover, even if Su Tong achieves success in the underworld, he still has a trump card in his hand. Leaving now? I'll treat you to tea another day. Su Tong smiled and waved towards Michael. His expression of wanting to be beaten made Michael feel depressed. After Michael left, Su Tong walked to the carriage and stretched out his hand to open the curtain. There was no Du Ziren in the empty carriage. This guy didn't even have a single thought. If Michael knew that he had been falsely shot by Du Ziren, I wonder if he would be so angry that he vomited blood. Although Du Ziren was not here, Su Tong could hear his voice in his ears. This is your master's decree of destiny, asking the emperor to give you a positive result. Before I set off, the emperor handed it to me. Please take care of me. Thank you, Master Shi. Just as Su Tong thought, the edict in his hand was the master's final trump card. As expected, the old man still loves me. Su Tong took a deep breath and put away the edict. After turning around and returning to the battleship, the eldest princess and Aimee stepped forward to congratulate him. It's easy to become a god, but hard to find true fruit. After all, there are so many places, 1 carrot and 1 pit. These 5 ghost emperors are the number of the 5 poles of the underworld, and there are only 10 positions in total. It is rumored that Du Ziren has a manic temper, so this position has been vacant. Now that Su Tong was brought to this position by the emperor, it was of great benefit to him. Just the blessing brought to Su Tong by this great position of Genkuo caused his soul thoughts to soar to 90,000 thoughts. At this moment, apart from the unstable foundation, his status and strength are no different from those of the second-generation gods. Ha ha ha, boss, now we're in trouble. Gao Zhou and others were dancing with excitement. Even if they were enshrined in a temple, they would still be treated in a separate room. What's more, Su Tong, as the Southern Ghost Emperor, is on the same level as Du Xiren. If they die in the future and go to the underworld, they will be treated like walking sideways. The kind that can pick a position even when reincarnated. If I don't drink Mengpo's soup, Mengpo can only stare. Seeing that he was getting carried away, Su Tong had to pour cold water on him. Don't be stupid, if you can't stop the gods and the gods of death, the world will collapse and the underworld will turn into ruins. Hearing this, Gao Zhou was stunned. Yes, the position of Southern Emperor seems to be extremely respected, but in fact the benefit is just to increase Su Tong's strength. Is it in vain that the Emperor improves your strength? Of course not. By accepting this position of Genkuo, I am completely tied to the underworld. Go fight with the god of death and fight with the gods, and you can't hide even if you want to. And there were some things that Su Tong couldn't say, and he couldn't say them out loud. He already felt that behind him, Fu Jun's palm was manipulating the chessboard. But at this point, he had no way out. Even if there were mountains of swords and seas of fire ahead, he had to rush forward. At this time, Du Xiren's carriage turned around. Upon seeing this, Su Tong immediately asked the battleship to follow. After crossing the two worlds again, what caught everyone's eyes was the evil that covered the sky. Looking around, I saw countless corpses moving forward on the ground. Gao Zhou's spirit was shaken, and when he looked around, his eyes shone brightly. The other players all felt their scalps numb as they watched this scene. An army of tens of millions of corpses appeared in front of them as black as ants. There are even corpses of gods and beasts among them. Da-da-da-da. In the distance, neat footsteps sounded, and a ghost rider wearing black armor was seen walking majestically. Different from the ghost riders Su Tong had encountered in the underworld, this ghost rider was the elite among the elite in the underworld. It was Du Xiren who spent countless years raising an army. Looking at the entire Netherland, except for the Forbidden Army on Yushan Mountain, there is no other army that can fight with it. Just the attack of the aura that destroyed the world and destroyed the earth made many players feel the taste of death. Not to mention those resurrected dead gods, even the third generation of gods would not dare to rashly set foot in this country that has become the world of the dead. A cavalryman discovered Su Tong and rushed over quickly. After reining in his horse, he took off his helmet and revealed a handsome face. Commander of the Central Army, pay homage to the Emperor. Su Tong stared at the face in front of him and was stunned. Not only was he stunned, even Gao Zhou was dumbfounded. He stared at the handsome face in front of him with wide eyes. Are you still alive? Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 1162. No wonder Gao Zhou was so surprised, because standing in front of them was their old acquaintance, Zhang Haisheng. Even if he turned into ashes, he would recognize this guy, but what puzzled Su Tong and others was how could he appear in this place. It is said that Zhang Haisheng's soul was shattered by Su Tong as early as when he was in Tianmen. Although his body is alive, his soul is gone, so how could he appear here? But the face in front of him was indeed Zhang Haisheng. However, after the other party heard Gao Zhou's words, his face was full of confusion. He looked at Gao Zhou carefully and said doubtfully, "Your Excellency is." Seeing that Zhang Haisheng didn't recognize him, Gao Zhou could only look at Su Tong. Su Tong hooked his fingers and picked up the thread of fate on the other person's body. Through the thread of fate, Su Tong can watch this person's past and future. After a while, Su Tong let go of his hand and squinted his eyes to look at the person in front of him. "Is your name Zhang Nian?" Yes. Su Tong nodded and immediately felt relieved. The bright moon rises over the sea, and the river spring enters the old year. Zhang Haisheng is dead, and the person in front of him is Zhang Nian. Are they related? It does matter, but not much. To be precise, it was the luck of Qingcheng Mountain that caused Zhang Haishen's soul to disperse, but he also got an opportunity in the fairy world. It was just this chance that, although it could save him once, the lack of soul also caused Zhang Haishen's consciousness to disappear completely, and Zhang Nian in front of him was equivalent to Zhang Haishen's rebirth. Although he inherited part of Zhang Haishen's luck, he did not inherit his memory, so it was inevitable that he would not be able to recognize Su Tong and others. It's just that he is a soul after all, without a body, and he fell from the 9 heavens into the underworld. If it were anyone else, he would only be a lonely ghost in the city of feudal death. But under the care of Qingcheng Mountain's 800 years of luck, this kid was spotted by Du Ziren through some strange combination of circumstances. Maybe Du Ziren discovered that this boy had great luck, so he took him under his command. Now he is under Du Ziren's account, the commander of the Central Army, and he can be regarded as a 7th grade Yin officer, not too big or too small. It's a coincidence, it can be regarded as our cause and effect. It just happens. Just follow me and be a messenger. With one word, Su Tong cancelled Zhang Nian's original position and brought him under his command. This was his privilege as the Ghost Emperor, and he did not need to report to Du Ziren. The two were at the same level, and Du Ziren had military power and could command the Yin Cao army. But since I was at the same level as him, I was naturally able to control the transferred internal affairs powers. In the past, this kind of thing would have required Du Ziren to negotiate with him to divide the authority, but in this extraordinary period, there was not so much emphasis on it. Su Tong called out the space between reality, and summoned all the nightmare cavalry in the space between reality, and handed them over to Zhang Nian to lead. Take me to see Du Ziren. When Zhang Nian heard this, he immediately nodded in agreement and led the team around him to walk ahead to clear the way for Su Tong. Boss, is he Zhang Haisheng? Isn't this guy's soul gone? On the way, Gao Zhou couldn't help but ask. Su Tong briefly explained the process to them. After hearing the whole process, Gao Zhou and his party couldn't help complaining, what is the chance that this luck will happen to him? It's a pity that if you hadn't cut off his path, with this luck, he would have been the protagonist of this era. The eldest princess covered her mouth and smiled softly. Every era has a protagonist. These people are blessed by great luck and can soar to great heights. Su Tong also had the idea of bringing Zhang Haisheng into the team. Not allowed. Not only because Zhang Haisheng is not willing to be subordinate to others and act as a green leaf, but also because the fate of the two people has too many intersections. For example, the 9 Immortals Cauldron. There is no need to say more about how important this treasure is. If the two of them are in a team, can Su Tong seize other people's treasures without giving them to them? In addition, Zhang Haishen's luck is too strong, which is different from Li Bo's invincible shit luck. This kind of person with extremely strong luck should stay away from him, because often the unlucky ones are the people around him. For example, if a bullet hits 2 people, even if Zhang Haisheng doesn't dodge, the bullet will eventually hit himself. This will instead suppress the development of the entire team. Invisibly and unintentionally, all kinds of opportunities in the world will be tilted towards him. Such a team will sooner or later break out into violent conflicts and eventually fall apart. Time is destiny, and you can't say who is right or wrong. Su Tong could only sigh in his heart, but for the two of them to come together again in this final battle, perhaps it was the fulfillment of God's will, or in other words, it was Su Tong's repayment of cause and effect. Not long after passing through the sea of thousands of sinister soldiers, Du Ziren's palace suddenly appeared in front of him. 18 shady commanders and ghost generals under Du Xiren's command were already waiting for Su Tong's arrival outside the palace. Standing in front was none other than Siekifan Bu. "You guys wait here, I'll go in and take a look alone." After Su Tong signaled everyone to stay on the battleship, he walked into the palace alone. Regarding Du Xiren, Su Tong could not completely trust him. It's not a distrust of him, but a distrust of the people behind Du Logui. Before the truth was revealed, even though he was such a good man, he didn't dare to completely believe him. Who can guarantee that at the last moment, he will not be reduced to an outcast? Meet the emperor. The 18 ghost generals and Yin Shui all knelt down and worshipped on the ground. It's just that Su Tong felt a little unhappy when he saw their expressions. It's strange to feel happy. They have practiced hard for many years and fought on the battlefield, and they have made countless achievements. But for this great position of Genkuo, I dare not mention the slightest thought. However, Su Tong, a junior, had neither unparalleled merit nor super strength, so he was sent forward abruptly following the decree of the Lord. Especially when I learned that it was Su Tong's master who used his destiny edict in exchange for the prince, I felt so angry. Some of them have met Shuigui and know that Shuigui is the person who inherited the destiny and completely brought the curtain down on the old era. He has endured the torture of destiny and has a rough fate. If Shuigui uses the decree of destiny to become the ghost emperor of this side and achieves the 5 extremes, they will not dare to say anything. Didn't Du Xiren take the initiative to recruit him because he knew that Shuigui had the decree of destiny in his hand? He even lent his dragon robe and jade crown to Shuigui at first. His purpose was to hope that Shuigui would enlighten him. Who would have known that at the last moment, Shuigui would instead send the Edict of Destiny and ask the prince to confer the title of Ghost Emperor on his good disciple, Su Tong. But Fu Jun actually agreed without hesitation at all. Such a result will inevitably make everyone feel envious and jealous, but also make their teeth itch with hatred. Su Tong clearly saw the disdain in everyone's eyes. He just curled his lips, ignored the angry eyes of these handsome ghost generals, and walked straight into the palace. Now, these handsome ghost generals were even more annoyed, because Su Tong didn't speak, so they could only half kneel on the ground and wait. In the palace, Du Xiren was seen staring at the sand table in front of him. When he saw Su Tong striding in, he frowned, but he soon felt relieved. I thought to myself, looks like I still need to get used to it. Immediately, a smile appeared on his face. As soon as we said goodbye that day, I felt that you were a person. Who would have thought that when we meet again, you and I will already belong to the same party? Su Tong heard his master talk about Du Xiren many times, but he only really saw Du Xiren once in the underworld. In his memory, the bad-tempered ghost emperor slapped Po Meng on the face in public. But it gave him a lot of bad breath. Because of this, I can't say that I have much fondness for Du Xiren, but it's not to the extent of having any dissatisfaction with him. Senior's demeanor back then is still fresh in my memory. Now I just borrowed the power of my master's sect and was lucky enough to be favored by the Lord. If there are any shortcomings, please give me some help from Senior. Ha ha ha, Brother Su, we are on the same level now, let's just say we are on the same level. Please sit down. The two of them were polite for a while, but Du Xiren soon stopped talking nonsense and said straight to the point, the army is ready and will move to the upper battlefield soon. Gigzu Mountain must be captured. At this point, Du Xiren looked at Su Tong. What we were fighting for at the beginning was the key to Yingsu Mountain. This key later fell into your hands. Now the gods regard you as a traitor, and the god of death seems to be looking for you too. Are you sure you want to enter the battlefield together? Du Xiren's words were already obvious at this point. If Su Tong gives him the key, he won't have to participate in the battle at Gigzu Mountain and can find a cooler place to rest. After all, anyone can meet them. The upper battlefield is destined to be a huge melee. Even Du Xiren can't guarantee that he will have the last laugh. In this way, Senior can lead the army to charge, and I will follow the army and charge into Gigzu Mountain. Unexpectedly, Su Tong didn't answer his words at all. Instead, he changed his voice and decided the direction directly over Du Ziren. At this time, Du Ziren couldn't help but smile bitterly. I always heard Shuekui say that this kid is very naughty, and I finally saw it today. It's just, what exactly is it at the foot of Gigzu Mountain? What if we grab it? Seeing that Du Ziren had no objection to him, Su Tong immediately hit the snake with a stick and asked. This is the purpose of Su Tong coming here. Through his fate, he saw the tip of the iceberg in Gigzu Mountain, which was a huge altar. Perhaps, as the rumors say, it is the creation altar of the god of death, which can completely integrate the mirror world and reality. Now the gods are fighting, and the god of death is also fighting. The purpose of the two can be understood, it is nothing more than offense and defense, but what is the purpose of Hades? This is what Su Tong wants to know. Seeing Su Tong's straightforward question, Du Ziren narrowed his eyelids, took out a decree from his sleeve and handed it to him. When Su Tong took a look, he saw the divine power of the decree flowing around, with cloud patterns flashing on it. This was the real decree of the emperor. Seeing this, Su Tong took a deep breath, took the decree in his hand, carefully opened a corner, and squinted his eyes to look inside. I saw two words written on the blank decree: destroy. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 1163. Su Tong returned the decree to Du Ziren, his eyes deep in thought. Destroyed. This is the attitude of Fujun towards the altar in Gigzu Mountain. If you think about it carefully, it is indeed in the interest of Hades, but is it just that? Su Tong always felt that Fujun's idea might not be so simple. Besides, destroying the altar will not have any impact. He looked at Du Ziren, wanting to hear his thoughts. Du Ziren looked at Su Tong's confused expression and smiled calmly. Actually, it's very simple. The altar at Gigzu Mountain will also collapse the three realms, but the Lord has been prepared for it. When the time comes, he will use big means to prop up the underworld. Then it will only be the remaining realm of the underworld will naturally reopen the world, the sun, and the moon. Du Ziren was talking eloquently, and his eyes could already outline the arrival of the great world. At that time, they will no longer be bound by ghosts and gods, and will advance to a higher level of gods. When he thought of this, Du Ziren could no longer suppress his murderous intention and wanted to rush into the battlefield and kill him. But when Du Ziren looked back, he saw Su Tong was silent, and his face suddenly darkened. Why, do you have any worries, my dear brother? No, I just dare to ask Du Jun, was this plan finalized by Fujun himself? Hearing Su Tong's question, Du Ziren twitched the corner of his mouth and waved his hand. The Lord will not speak about this kind of thing in person, but the meaning of the decree is very obvious. Destroy the altar, reopen the three realms, and you and me. There will be big profits for everyone. Su Tong nodded non-committally. Just follow what Du Jun said and we will cooperate. Hearing that Su Tong was willing to cooperate, Du Ziren felt relieved. What he was most afraid of was that Su Tong would not cooperate. In fact, when Xie Qifanba was asked to invite Su Tong, Du Ziren had made up his mind that if Su Tong did not cooperate, he would withhold the royal decree and force him to hand over the keys. But the plan couldn't keep up with the change. When he realized that Michael had caught up with Su Tong and was about to take him away by force, he had to throw out the decree first. In this way, Su Tong would have an equal relationship with him, and he might not be able to take the key by force. Fortunately, since Su Tong was willing to cooperate, he was left with a lot of trouble. Only. At this time, Su Tong Xiao's voice changed, and his expression suddenly became troubled. It's just that the gods may not let us get what we want, not to mention those terrifying gods of death. Duziran knew that Su Tong's words were testing him, but it was time to let him see his strength. After all, we are all in the same boat now, and we are all our own people, so there is no need to hide them. The gods are easy to deal with. I have a treasure called the Shen Shen Sail. Whenever there is a celebrity on the sail, I can suppress it with just a wave of my hand. Duziran said with a smile, this suppressing sail is his most precious treasure, which can suppress the gods in the sky. As for the dead gods, they don't need to take action, the gods have their own methods to deal with them. They can just hide in the back and take advantage of the situation. I see. Su Tong knew that Duziran must have many things on his hands that he had not told him. Perhaps on certain matters, this guy has already made some kind of deal with the gods. Looking at the thread of fate on Duziran's body, Su Tong hesitated for a moment, but finally did not make a move. After all, the person in front of him is Duziran. If he checks the thread of his fate rashly, he will be noticed by Duziran. But it's not impossible. It only takes a moment to find an opportunity to distract him. Let's see what this guy is planning first. After Su Tong made up his mind, he chatted with Duziran for a few more words before getting up and returning to the Sun battleship. When everyone saw him coming back, they quickly asked what was going to happen next. Su Tong probably informed everyone of the plan, but did not mention the specific purpose. He just told them that Duziran would attack from the front and they could rush in from the side. As for the Emperor's decree and Duziran's attitude, Su Tong didn't say anything at all. Because he didn't agree with Duziran's idea at all. The collapse of the three realms left the underworld as the only world. Not to mention that Duziran himself understood this idea. If Fu Jun really thought so simple, it would be easier for him to destroy the key. Is it really that simple? If it was really that simple, why would a fool jump into the Wangchuan River? If it's really that simple, then what's the difference between the final outcome and the fate you see? The Emperor's decree only mentioned destruction, but did not directly state that it meant destroying the altar. As a chess player, what should you do to achieve your goals? In a daze, Su Tong's mind was outside the chessboard. The opponent in front of him was not only the second-generation gods and youngest headed by the Queen Mother of the West, but also the Invisible Prince. I am not only on the chessboard, but also outside the chessboard. The answer to this game of chess lies within yourself, but what is the answer? Many mysteries surround his heart. Even though Su Tong has an exquisite heart with 7 orifices, he still has no clue. Time passed quickly, and within a few days, Duziran was ready to enter the high-level battlefield. In the past few days, intelligence from high-level battlefields has been continuously transmitted from the front lines. The army of the dead gods marched forward with great songs. The gods mobilized 300,000 heavenly soldiers to form a formation of 10,000 immortals, and beat several dead gods to ashes outside Gigzu Mountain. These dead gods are not the minions who were resurrected, but the ones who escaped from the underworld. The strength and supernatural powers are all earth-shattering. 300,000 heavenly soldiers formed the 10,000 immortal formation, and only killed a few of them, but the gods were even more brutal. The 10,000 immortals formation was penetrated, and the 300,000 heavenly soldiers ended up with numerous casualties. The 5 elders of the 5 parties saw that the formation was broken and ended up personally, but it was just a draw. The gods of the West also joined the battlefield. On the surface, they have reached some kind of agreement with Kunlun, but they have never taken the initiative to fight. On the contrary, the Western Hell side seems to have clearly joined the camp of the Death God. A large number of Western demons poured into the battlefield like a tide. On the current battlefield, every inch of land in the sky and on the ground is stained with divine blood. In today's upper battlefield, a god may fall to the earth with every breath. These battle reports were constantly sent to Su Tong, which made Su Tong feel frightened. In the past, this information would not be shown to Su Tong, but now it is different. He has the identity of the Ghost Emperor, and all battle reports that Du Ziren knows must be forwarded to him. The bloody battle report made Su Tong feel very depressed. Occasionally he glanced at the players on the battleship deck who were still preparing for battle, and his expression was unavoidable. He is not a murderer, nor is he a pervert. In fact, he is just a person who enjoys playing a different life experience. But I didn't expect to embark on such a path step by step. Aimee and the eldest princess saw that he was a little depressed, so the two women simply sat next to him without saying a word. They helped Su Tong make tea and held his forehead. Just when Su Tong felt a little relaxed, Su Tong suddenly opened his eyes. Problem occurs. Su Tong's expression changed drastically, and he quickly walked out of the cabin, only to see a thunder burst in the sky. The thunder penetrated the three realms, making all the mountain gods, ghosts, and monsters in the three realms tremble. A meteor dragged its dazzling tail through the sky. All the creatures felt a sense of desolation in their hearts. Report. Zhang Nian rode a war horse, quickly rushed into the battleship, and handed Su Tong the latest battle report. Su Tong took it and took a look, his eyes twitched. He sent a message to Gao Zhou and others, everyone is ready to set off. As he said this, he handed the battle report to the eldest princess and Aimee. The two of them couldn't help but be surprised when they came over to take a look. Tai, Nishan, and Kong suddenly joined forces to launch a sneak attack on the gods. Jinwu Tianjun, Dongfang Qingdi, Southern Red Emperor, and Central Yellow Emperor all fell. The fall of Jinwu Tianjun and the death of 3 of the 5 elders of the 5 directions were such losses. Not even the gods could afford such a price. It is said that Tianyu personally took action, deceived Tianji, and led an army to kill him. However, the battle report also mentioned that the losses suffered by the youngest were also not low. Tai was severely injured by Jinwu Tianjun, and Nishan was almost disabled. Only Kong escaped unscathed. As for the other dead gods who were killed, there were even fewer. Su Tong looked at the contents of the battle report and could already imagine what kind of battle of gods it was. I can't help but feel a little regretful that I couldn't watch the battle in person. Report. At this time, another messenger soldier rushed over quickly and held Du Ziren's command flag above his head with both hands. On the order of the emperor, the entire army will attack. The army will attack from the front. Please ask Mr. Su to take it from the side and go straight to Gigzu Mountain. Su Tong nodded and took the order. Then the battleship started and began to move in the direction of the army. All the way to the northernmost edge of the world, there is a huge high wall built with countless corpses. Just seeing this wall makes people feel a strong feeling of discomfort. The generals Su Tong had seen before in front of Du Ziren's palace were already on their mounts and were strictly waiting for them. After seeing Su Tong, the faces of these generals were not very good, because Su Tong gave them a blow last time they met and made them kneel outside for several hours. They were not allowed to stand up until Su Tong left the palace. Finally, Du Ziren came out and they were able to stand up. As the army surged under the high wall, dozens of black tornadoes formed into infinite evil spirits and poured into the high wall. Accompanied by the blessing of evil energy, the high wall in front of him emitted the howls of thousands of creatures. The entire high wall began to seep cyan liquid. I don't want to die, I want to go home, I want to go home. A player on the battleship suddenly began to lose control of his emotions, as if he was going crazy and wanted to jump off the battleship. Fortunately, everyone had quick eyesight and quick hands, pulling him back and pressing him to the ground hard. It wasn't until Gu Zibai took action and knocked him unconscious that the screams on the battleship began to quiet down. It's just that the feeling of uneasiness has begun to spread on the battleship. Everyone's spirits were tense to the extreme. Even Li Bo, Gao Zhou, and even Gu Zibai are no exception. a huge war drum appeared in their sight. The war drum looked like a mountain, with a total of 68 faces. Chiguo, a giant with an upper body, slowly swung the drum hammer and hit the war drum hard. Dong 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 dong. 68 war drums erupted with a huge roar, and waves of sound rolled in, giving everyone a strange state. Yellow Spring Fu, after suffering a fatal blow, the blessed person will have a chance to be resurrected. Note, only when the physical body is not completely destroyed. Seeing the privileged status blessed by them, everyone's eyes suddenly lit up. This was tantamount to having an extra life. However, Su Tong did not see the changes in the fate of everyone. He asked Gao Zhou and others to come to him, and after quietly taking a look at Kin Kimin, he found that the result was not good. Then he looked at the eldest princess and Ame, but the ending still made his heart twitch. Crash la la la. More and more cyan liquid poured out of the high wall in front of them, and then these liquids actually rolled up countless skeletons on the high wall, turning into a desperate sea of skeletons and crashing into the void. At this moment, the sky and the earth were shaking, and a wall of light visible to the naked eye gradually appeared in the void during the impact. That's what's called a boundary barrier. As the sea of skeletons collided and corroded, the barrier was quickly penetrated. Opened. The eldest princess took a deep breath and pointed at the glimmer of light that appeared in front of her. As the light spots grew larger and larger, the thick smell of blood began to fill the air. Boom! Like a vast ocean, the sea of skeletons rushed out of the barrier first and swallowed up the world in front of it in an instant. Shen Linton, who was still fighting on the battlefield, was caught off guard and was suddenly swallowed up by the sea of skeletons. The sea of skeletons that could easily corrode even the barriers was no joke. Once contaminated, even gods would be quickly corroded into slag. Just as the sea of skeletons swept past, a large area of the ground in front of them had been cleared. Buzz. Several ghost generals drew out their swords from their waists. The whole army attacks, follow me to kill. Along with the roaring sound, the mighty army roared out, and countless skeletons and walking corpses rushed out of the world along with the army. Su Tong and his party stood on the battleship, watching the army rush forward in a swarm, but they did not follow up immediately, but waited. A massive army rushed out of the world, but before they could clearly see the opponent in front of them, a golden rain suddenly fell from the sky. Golden light spots about the size of eggs were falling down like a violent storm. These light spots contain huge sacred power, and with just one, the explosion is powerful enough to cover hundreds of meters around it. Boom 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 boom. The terrifying golden light instantly cleared the battlefield, and the ghosts, gods, and troops that had just rushed out were cleared out almost instantly. Everyone on the battleship fell into silence. Tens of thousands of Hades troops and several ghost generals were wiped out the moment they rushed out. This is the battlefield, where personal strength will be continuously weakened. Every step forward must be filled with life. Hiss. Everyone's face turned pale for a while, and many players even began to uncontrollably want to vomit, but they lay on the deck and looked down, looking at the dense black shadows below. After all, they were too embarrassed to vomit. But this is just the beginning. The sound of war drums continues, and the endless Hades army behind them begins a new round of charge. Only this time, in addition to the torn barrier in front of them, densely packed Hades armies rushed into the battlefield like a tide in the sky and under the earth. Head, let's. Gao Zhou walked to Su Tong and looked at the army that was still charging forward. He couldn't help but swallowed and wanted to ask Su Tong when they would rush in. Su Tong didn't speak, but his eyes pierced through time, and he could see from the future pictures what would happen if he rushed into the battlefield at this moment. Boom! Countless thunderbolts fell from the clouds. They were Xiao divine thunder. The thunderbolts fell to the ground and condensed without dissipating, forming a liquid-like appearance. This is thunder effusion, which is a rare treasure for thunder magic masters, but to the army of Hades, it is no more than poisonous arsenic. With a flash of lightning, the army that had just rushed out was instantly wiped out. Just as the third wave of troops rushed out, Su Tong suddenly raised the command flag in his hand, "Stop." With the command flag in hand, following Su Tong's voice, all the armies of Hades stopped in unison, as if they had received a unified order. Some even raised their feet in the air, but they still stayed there. Countless eyes were focused on the battleship, and just the glances they cast made everyone feel suffocated. Su Tong held the battle flag high, but his eyes were fixed on the front. Suddenly, Su Tong took out the Kinkan time stick and held it in his hand. With a shake of the long stick, the golden clouds turned into endless years, covering the army behind him. "Follow me, kill." After the voice fell, Su Tong jumped off the battleship and turned into a golden rainbow and rushed in. The moment Su Tong's figure rushed into this world, countless huge swords as big as mountains were slashed down in front of him. These giant swords carry majestic aura, and their sharp edges can kill gods and demons. But Su Tong had just seen the scene through the future. According to the future scene, this sword rain was going to kill thousands more armies of Hades. But now that he appears now, this fate should be changed. Su Tong raised his brows slightly and waved the Kinkan time stick in his hand. The shadow of the stick filled the sky for a moment, piercing through the future time and hitting these giant swords the next moment. Bang 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 bang. In an instant, the sword light above his head exploded. Su Tong's figure jumped up, and thousands of thoughts flashed between his eyebrows, showing the heaven and earth of the Dharma. The giant stood tall between heaven and earth, with a bead curtain and jade crown, and a dragon robe. He held a magic sword and slashed into the void in front of him. Boom! As the sword passed by, those gods hiding in the void were instantly killed in large swaths. Whoosh! Suddenly, a red light penetrated from the void, locked on Su Tong's forehead and flew towards him. God-killing sword. It is said that the Golden Summit Immortal has a roster in his hand. As long as a person's name is written on it, anyone who sets foot in this world will have this sword. This knife has the power to penetrate time and space and is hidden in the future. Even if Su Tong can observe the future, he will not be able to detect this knife. This is why the saying goes that the future cannot be trusted. Fortunately, Su Tong never dared to let down his guard since he entered the battlefield. Facing the sword that was killing him, he waved his left hand and used Ziju to reach out and grab the flying knife. Grab a handful in your hand. He waved his backhand towards the void. Whoosh! Suddenly the flying knife penetrated time and space, and the next moment it penetrated the souls of several immortals. With Su Tong as the vanguard, the pressure on the army behind them suddenly decreased, and they began to rush out in a swarm. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Thousands of heavenly soldiers shining with silver light in the sky were like wasps in a hive, flying down overwhelmingly. Kill, kill. Gao Zhou and others stood on the battleship, pointed at the figures of the heavenly soldiers in front, and ordered the vitality cannon to blast forward crazily. At this moment, all the players did not dare to hold back at all. They wanted to smash out all their skill and prop cards in one go. Because no one knows whether the person who dies in the next second will be him. Nyezeo, you are so brave. I spared your life at first, but now you are here. A long roar came from the sky, and Su Tong took a closer look. Hey, it's you. I saw a figure quietly appearing in the clouds in front of me, yelling at Su Tong. This person is none other than the Supreme Being. I had ruined his good deeds and killed his thoughts, but now the true Lord Shang Sheng came in person, ready to cut Su Tong into pieces. However, he still overestimated himself and thought that Su Tong was just the little ant in the script world. But he didn't expect that Su Tong's current strength was not what it used to be, and he had attained the position of Genkuo. How could he, a third-generation god, be compared to him? Shang Sheng Zhenjun was holding the Book of Heaven in his hand at this moment. With a swipe of his pen, he found Su Tong's name. He saw the vermilion pen stroke hard on it, intending to destroy Su Tong's fate first. But he didn't expect that the scarlet brush would not be able to leave any trace on Su Tong's name. On the contrary, Su Tong had a thought, and his figure appeared from the book of heaven in his hand. This heavenly book contains the blessings and fortunes of all the gods in the world. With a wave of the ink pen, even the luck of the gods will be ruined. But the true lord of Shangsheng did not know that Su Tong had achieved the great position of Zhenkuo. What is the great position of Zhenkuo? The supreme fruit of the righteous path inherits the ultimate position of heaven. You see, in Journey to the West, when Sun Wukong meets Guanyin Bodhisattva, his little mouth is as sweet as honey. But when he was enshrined as a Buddha and attained the great position of Zhengtuan, he would open his mouth to see that so-and-so Bodhisattva. It can be seen how powerful this great position of Zhenguo is. The Supreme Lord Shangsheng wanted to correct Su Tong's fortune, which was simply seeking death. Not only was there no success, but Su Tong's thoughts quickly appeared in front of him along with this mysterious force. He raised his hand and slashed the head of Lord Shangsheng with the Zhanzi Iju sword. Puff! The black and white ink-stained sword penetrated the soul of true Lord Shangsheng's forehead directly, causing true Lord Shangsheng's body to freeze. As Su Tong raised the sword, his body suddenly turned into thousands of soul thoughts and rained down. This is a thought from the gods, a rare and precious treasure, but now no one pays attention to it, allowing the true thoughts to spill out and be ruthlessly crushed by thousands of underworld armies below. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 1164. Kill. When Su Tong rushed out of the encirclement with the army behind him, the scene that greeted his eyes made even Su Tong couldn't help but feel goosebumps all over his body. The huge Gigzu mountain is just ahead. The difference from the middle and lower battlefields is that the mountain has been dug up at this moment and no longer looks like a mound. 80,000 miles high, the mountain is so huge that it cannot be carried by just one world. Just a mountain range is like an eternal dragon crossing several worlds. I had once seen the complete mountain of Gigzu Mountain from my destiny, but at that time the world was already a void, and there was no background, so it would not have much visual impact. Now, against the background of the mountains of today, the vastness of this mountain is revealed. Compared to the shock of Gigzu Mountain, what was even more mind-numbing was the endless army in front of us. Heaven, Buddhism, hell, Western gods, Asian god legions, the legions of all forces are entangled together. Looking around, they are so densely packed that there is no end in sight. Every second, gods will fall, and the blood and thoughts of gods will be sprinkled all over the earth. Su Tong's scalp was numb when he saw it, but he did not dare to hesitate for a second. He waved the Kinkan time stick in his hand to freeze all the figures rushing towards him in time. Immediately, the Dharma Prime behind him swung his divine sword and killed them all. Countless underworld troops behind him rushed forward in a black mass, and in an instant they were hundreds of miles away. It looks like a victory, but in fact it is a pile of corpses. From time to time, a ray of divine light would fall from the sky. I didn't know who was responsible for the magical power, but it would just fall in random directions. With a sound of boom, both gods and demons were instantly reduced to ashes in this huge explosion. A radius of 10 miles was directly swept away by the vast divine light. My head. I can't hold it anymore. Li Bo shouted to Su Tong. How long did it take before you rushed into the battlefield? It took less than a minute, not even 30 seconds, but all the players on the battleship had already used all the props and skills. Even though there were experts such as Gao Zhou, Li Bo, Lao Bai, Mei, and Princess Da on the battleship, they began to show their fatigue for a while facing the heavenly soldiers who kept rushing towards the battleship. This place is a complete meat grinder. Even the best of the 3 generations of gods may become cannon fodder in a place like this if they are not careful. Seeing the number of heavenly soldiers surrounding them increasing, seemingly endless, Su Tong could not retreat even for a moment. They must keep fighting forward. Only by allowing more Hades armies to rush out can they have a chance. If they are killed and retreated at this time, all their previous efforts and casualties will be wasted. At this time, Su Tong did not dare to hold back anymore. Countless thoughts flew up from his eyebrows, and in an instant, he turned into countless figures and rushed towards the heavenly soldiers in front of him. Boom 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 boom. Bai Shankao, Chunyang Sword Technique, Yan Shu, Purple Sky Divine Thunder, Time Storm, An Inch of Time. In an instant, all the abilities Su Tong has learned, with the release of thousands of thoughts in an instant, the world in front of him is transformed. Pierce it directly and turn it into chaos. It seemed that the victory was fruitful, but it was at the cost of thoughts. Just this one moment almost consumed half of Su Tong's thoughts. Ciziju. Su Tong pinched the magic formula with his fingers, and the thoughts that were immediately consumed were quickly replenished, and he was restored to perfection in an instant. This is the inheritance of the Nine Immortals Cauldron, the art of creating thoughts. Although he already learned the original name of the inheritance of the Nine Immortals Cauldron from Zhenjun Xiang, Su Tong still changed the name to Zhao Zijug. Whether it sounds good or not is secondary, the key is neatness. Maybe this is what is called obsessive-compulsive disorder. Su Tong attacked without sparing any effort, and the army advanced hundreds of miles again. At this time, the army of the underworld was fully deployed, and a large number of the underworld army began to rush forward one after another. Only then did Su Tong have a brief chance to breathe, return to the battleship, and led everyone back. The time before and after was only a short minute, but for everyone on the battleship, it was as long as a year. This is still the result of Su Tong turning on the Dharma image and standing in front of him. If Su Tong hadn't consumed his thoughts at all costs and forcibly smashed out a piece of heaven and earth, they might not have been able to hold on for even one stick of incense, and they would have died. Here. Su Tong sat on the deck, looking at the tired faces of everyone and their bodies covered with paint. He summoned the great Sun Ruyi furnace, and the billowing energy of life quickly poured out of the furnace, like rolling waves, splashing on everyone. For a moment, everyone felt cold all over, as if a clear spring was flowing away from them, and the pain on their bodies was no longer so unbearable. The losses were counted. Everyone was also shocked. The battleship originally had abundant energy crystals in reserve, but now there was actually not even one of them left. The casualties are quite acceptable. After all, on the battleship, the players are attacked the least. In addition, Su Tong is protecting the front, and there are top experts like Princess and Lao Bai sitting on the battleship. There are only a few unlucky guys, and the rest are casualties. Not big. But Su Tong's nightmare cavalry had lost 2/3, and Zhang Nian, who was following Su Tong, was also seriously injured. Just when Su Tong and others were sitting on the ground to rest, a messenger soldier holding an order flag quickly rushed straight to Su Tong. Report. The messenger soldier raised the command flag high above his head and knelt down in front of Su Tong. Du Jun has an order, please Su Jun to rush north quickly. He must reach the valley entrance of Gigzu Mountain within 3 hours. As soon as these words came out, everyone was instantly furious. 3 hours, that is, 6 hours, sounds very rich, but if you look carefully at the distance between them and Gigzu Mountain at this moment, that is no joke, at least it spans several worlds. Although there is no boundary barrier and there is no need to break through the boundary to teleport, every step forward is like a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. It is not an exaggeration to describe it. Rushing to the foot of Gigzu Mountain in 6 hours was asking them to die. Facing the anger of all the players, the soldier in charge of the communication didn't look good. He didn't know how difficult it was. Du Ziren made it very clear that there were only 3 hours, and 1 more minute would not be enough. If the time was missed, the main force would inevitably be defeated. It would be a fool's errand to want to kill Gigzu Mountain again by then. Sujun, do you want me to pass the message again? Zhang Nian asked in a low voice. Su Tong waved his hand and reached out to take down the order flag. This order seemed to be making things difficult for him, but he didn't know that no one on the battlefield was in trouble at this moment. As the main force, Du Ziren was hit even more cruelly, with countless underworld warriors being wiped out in ashes every second. Being able to hold on for 3 hours may not be Du Ziren's limit, but for those soldiers who are still working hard to build a road ahead, it is not a nightmare. Comparing his feelings, Su Tong has nothing to complain about. He is a person who wants to defy fate. If he doesn't even understand such a simple truth, he should kneel down as soon as possible and shout daddy to the fate in the dark. Seeing Su Tong accepting the military order, the soldier who summoned him was relieved. But what he didn't expect was that Su Tong suddenly reached out and patted his shoulder, "Say thank you to the main soldiers for me." The messenger soldier was startled. 2 balls of hellfire were beating in his empty pupils. He raised his head and looked at the newly appointed emperor in front of him. It was as if a ball of charcoal fire had been stuffed into his cold chest, and his whole body warmed up. Yes. He nodded solemnly, immediately turned around, jumped on his horse and rushed to the front line. First, can we really make it in 3 hours? Even Gao Zhou felt that this was an impossible task, and everyone on the battleship looked at Su Tong. Su Tong did not answer. He had tried his best to look at the future and find the answer. But the result was not satisfactory. It was too chaotic and full of countless unpredictable variables. The picture that could be shown in the future was completely chaotic and had no reference value at all. Okay. At this time, the eldest princess suddenly said, "Don't you have a teleportation array? I can increase the distance by 20 times based on the teleportation array." 20 times. Mas screamed, then he took out his calculator and began tapping rapidly on it. After a while, Master came up with the formula he wanted. In order to make sure that there were no mistakes, he even called the high priest Hagrid, who was hiding in the cabin and had already peed from fear. After the two carefully compared the data, Master immediately said, 3 times, as long as 3 jumps, we can get there. It only takes 2 hours. To be precise, it's an hour, with an interval of 20 minutes each time. Hagrid added the details in a low voice. This answer made everyone feel happy. But Master's next words made everyone's heart skip a beat. It is necessary to transform the core energy of the Sun battleship, which will reduce the speed of the Sun battleship a lot. After finishing speaking, for fear that he was too vague, Master added, a lot. Many, how many? Seeing that Master was still vague at this time, Gao Zhou was so angry that he wanted to punch the big nose. Almost at a standstill. Seeing this, Hagrid had no choice but to explain it hard, because every time he teleported, all the energy in the vitality furnace would be drained. The battleship would lose almost all energy and could only rely on some remaining energy to maintain suspension in order to maintain its previous speed. Totally impossible. After hearing Hagrid's words, everyone started to think over it. In other words, after we teleport over, we will just stop where we are and be a living target for 20 minutes. Li Bo's eyes widened. Not only that, because our teleportation distance is very far, we will be far away from these underworld armies that are covering us. Oh, Poseidon, I think this is a wrong idea. Hagrid thought this idea was too crazy and he was completely alone. The rest of the people looked at each other. They had already experienced that feeling of despair just now. Even 1 minute is an ordeal for them, let alone 20 minutes. For a moment, everyone looked at Su Tong, as if waiting for Su Tong's answer. Facing everyone's eyes looking at him, Su Tong felt the heavy pressure on his shoulders for the first time. Hey, what are you thinking about? At this time, a person walked up to everyone and broke the silence. I think you are thinking too much. After we come in, is there any way out? It's just a matter of dying early and dying late. No, there won't really be anyone. Do you imagine that we can go back alive? As soon as these words came out, it was like lifting the fig leaf for everyone. Su Tong looked at this strange player. He didn't recognize who the player was. His strength seemed to be average, but his eyes were clear. Although there was a strong sadness, there was a broadness in his expression. It aroused the admiration of everyone present. Everyone, we have nothing to lose. All we have left is this life. Don't forget what we said before we came. The other party turned around and walked quickly to the deck. His bloodshot eyes glared at the distant sky, and raised his middle finger towards the supreme gods. You. As soon as these words came out, everyone was moved, and even Li Bo was infected by this heroic spirit. This brother is right. If we die, we must die together, and we must him hard before we die. That's right, if a person dies and a bird looks up to the sky, he will not die for tens of thousands of years. Brothers, give it a try. Everyone was in high spirits, and the fatigue just now was gone. Seeing this, Su Tong only felt a sore nose, but his heart was more complicated than anyone else's. He looked around and saw that the lines of fate on Gao Zhou and others were quickly turning gray. He knew exactly what it meant. But what can I do if I see it? How many fates can a person like him change? If you can change yourself, can you change everyone? This feeling of powerlessness came over, making Su Tong feel the pain of being torn apart in his heart. Holding back the tears in his eyes, Su Tong nodded towards Master and asked him to quickly modify the teleportation beacon. Since I have enough time, I might as well rest here for a while. Su Tong took advantage of the opportunity to take out Meng Po's pot and various ingredients. He originally wanted to cook a meal for everyone, but when he thought that this might be everyone's last meal, he couldn't bear to cook it himself. After all, his accomplishments in cooking were simply appalling. When the delicious food in the pot exudes an attractive aroma, everyone holds the bowls and chopsticks and stuffs them into their mouths. As the delicious food enters my mouth, the panic and fear in my heart gradually dissipate. Just like the Chinese tradition, the happiest thing is to be a dead ghost on the road to hell. Having a full meal before death is not only a respect for life, but also a psychological comfort. Then Su Tong took out the chincha and distributed the wine to everyone. It was said that the wine had been stored for hundreds of years in Plum Village, as if it had been prepared for this moment. As soon as they were full of wine and food, everyone breathed a sigh of relief, and their mental state returned to its peak in an instant. Master walked up to Su Tong and nodded. Indicating that the teleportation array had been set up, Su Tong looked at Ame beside him, stretched out his hand to hold her in his hand, and then saw that the eldest princess was still staring at him, so he simply pulled her little hand into his arms. He hugged the two of them and kissed them both hard. I have no chance in this life. I will pay you back in the next life. This life is enough. Ame leaned on Su Tong's shoulder. Although Su Tong didn't say anything, the talent of the Snow Clan had already told him that death was approaching quietly. But, who wants to wait for you in the next life? The eldest princess snorted and curled her lips, but she held Su Tong's hand tighter. Buzz. Along with the harsh buzzing sound, a large amount of vitality poured out of the divine furnace and was injected into the teleportation array. At the same time, the eldest princess raised her palm. At the moment when the teleportation array was activated, the power of the awakened space and the burst of light from the teleportation array overlapped each other. Whoosh! As the battleship turned into light and shadow, everyone felt their feet tremble, and then a huge thrust came, almost causing some players to fall out of the battleship. The time and space in front of me suddenly turned into thousands of fragmented streams of light. Ultra-long distance transmission. Even if there is no bump when penetrating the boundary barrier, huge pressure hits, causing everyone to suffer pain like tearing. I don't know how long this process took, but as the light spread in front, everyone suddenly felt their bodies lightened, but the dizziness that followed made many people couldn't help but lie on the ground and vomited. But before they could spit what was in their mouths on the deck, a blazing bright light hit their heads. "I come." Guzibai jumped up and struggled to escape. Ouch! Dragon roars came and went, and his body turned into a human-shaped fire dragon. His martial arts will penetrated the starry sky, like a mountain across the sky, with an overwhelming momentum. Boom! He swung his dragon fist and hit the bright light in front of him, causing hundreds of cracks to appear on the ground. Each large crack is several miles long, and the scene is terrifying. This anxious land seems to be sinking and disappearing completely, a sign of doom. Taking advantage of this moment of respite, everyone ignored the stains on the deck and went into battle. When the bright light dissipated, a deafening roar suddenly sounded in his ears, and he saw a black army of demons on the left, heading towards this direction in a mighty manner. On the right side is a group of people holding long sticks and chanting the name of the Buddha to protect the Dharma. This is obviously a battle between Buddhism and demons, and Su Tong and the others are right in the middle of the two. Seeing this, everyone was shocked. We have a pretty good relationship with Buddhism. After all, people subconsciously think that Buddhism eliminates demons and defends the Tao, so they should have no problem helping Buddhism now. But Li Bo shattered everyone's illusions with one sentence: "Don't be stunned, what about Buddhism? Even if Tathagata Buddha comes in person today, it has nothing to do with us. He will kill one by one, and no one will spare his hands. This is a war, a melee between the gods. Look at the blood on the bodies of those Buddhist guardians and their eyes full of murderous intent. It doesn't look like they are here to beg for help." Hearing Li Bo's words, everyone immediately gave up all their worries and didn't care about anything, just taking random shots. Sure enough, as Li Bo said, these Buddhist guardians didn't care about the life and death of the players in front of them. Instead, they felt that these people were in the way. The long sticks flashing with Buddha's light in their hands were swung together. The next moment, the Buddha's light exploded, turning into the scorching sun and the silver moon. The brilliance was like a waterfall, shining brightly in the void, and all hit the warship, making a loud noise. Just this moment of collision caused dozens of players to be shattered to pieces on the spot. Li Bo transformed into a high priest, released thousands of goo insects, waved his hands, and mobilized the power of the earth and mountains to smash forward. Gao Zhou even summoned General Broken Blade, which was like an ancient ferocious beast, emitting bursts of black light. Wherever the black light passed, minced meat flew everywhere, and several demons were cut into pieces on the spot. Su Tong also took action at this moment. Thousands of thoughts gave birth to a brilliant brilliance, the heaven and earth of the Dharma were activated, and a sword swept thousands of miles. Amitabha. At this time, a sound of the Buddha's name came, and a bright light fell from the midair. It looked like a boy or girl, holding a purification bottle, with compassionate eyes. They are none other than the four great bodhisattvas of Buddhism and the Taoist Guanxian Sahang. Su Tong glanced at him coldly. "If you want to recite sutras, go ahead and recite them. Don't mumble in front of me. It's very annoying." After hearing this, Taoist Sahang was not angry, and just said, "Buddha's Dharma is boundless, and you will find a safe place when you turn around. If your venerable master is willing, you only need to hand over the key and you can escape from the sea of suffering." "What if I don't give it?" Su Tong asked with a cold face. "Please forgive me for being rude, poor monk." Taoist Sahang had a cold look on his brows, clasped his hands together, and recited Buddhist scriptures, and the Dharma suddenly penetrated the heaven and earth. Beside him, 9 magic weapons emerged, including a white jade sword, a diamond sword, a green wood spear, a tianbao umbrella, a jade bell, a bronze gong, 9 magic weapons, each one less than 3 inches long, warm and crystal clear, exuding a breathtaking breath. At this point, there is no longer any talk of compassion. To seize the key is to seize the opportunity. Following Taoist Sahang's thought, the 9 magic weapons hit Su Tong directly. These 9 magic weapons are all Buddhist treasures. Taking out any one of them has the power to change the world. Once it falls, it is enough to turn all the mountains and rivers into ashes. Including the sun battleship behind Su Tong is no exception. Seeing that the opponent's attack was a sure kill, Su Tong no longer had any secrets to hide. Stepping on the Wuzi Ju under his feet, Amoran's sword was held in the palm of his hand. Facing the attack of the 9 treasures, Su Tong just sighed in his heart, I originally wanted to leave it to the old magic stick, but you are so anxious, so I gave it away first, here you go. Su Tong only saw a thought arise, and in an instant countless dense thoughts appeared behind him. These thoughts shone with divine brilliance, turning into dense stars that shrouded the world. Seeing this, Taoist Sahang immediately sneered. What kind of person he is, he has definitely seen the methods that go against the sky. Even if you borrow the power of the stars in the sky today, you won't be able to stand up. Boom. At this time, the star map unfolded behind Su Tong, but the power radiated was completely different from what Taoist Sahang thought. It was not the power of stars, but a ball of brilliant white light. Stars turned into thousands of thoughts were like mirrors, illuminating the white light in the nebula. Ordinarily, the power of the star must be blessing the caster. But the power of the stars summoned by Su Tong followed the movement of his thoughts and blessed the 9 treasures in front of him. At this time, Taoist Sahang was a little confused and couldn't help but laugh. The Venerable's method is indeed extraordinary. He actually blessed me with Buddha treasures, which opened my eyes. But Taoist Sahang, who was smiling and smiling, suddenly froze on his face. I saw that Jabeo, under the blessing of starlight, lost the treasure light in an instant, and even the connection with her was cut off directly by an invisible force. How could this happen? What are you talking about? Taoist Sahang was shocked. His 9 treasures had been nourished by Yuan Shen for who knows how many years. Even the great sage of Buddhism could not resist them. Why did he suddenly lose control? Thank you Bodhisattva for sending me the treasure. Su Tong would not explain to this Bodhisattva that his energyless divine light was the nemesis of the gods. It was too domineering, and I didn't know how to control it before, until I suddenly realized the star pinching technique in the inheritance of the 9 immortals and got inspiration from it. Since you can't bless yourself, you can simply bless your enemies. Su Tong had already thought of a name for this move, so he called it Open the Door and Send Warmth. Su Tong waved his hand and took all the 9 treasures in his hands. These 9 treasures were all Buddhist treasures. Now they fell into his hands. Unfortunately, he had no time to understand the secrets. The road ahead is difficult, Bodhisattva, you should stay. Su Tong looked sideways at Taoist Sahang, and immediately controlled the star map behind him to kill Taoist Sahang. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 1165. Seeing Su Tong rushing towards him, Taoist Sahang did not dare to touch him head-on. He turned around and quickly turned into a golden rainbow and fled away. If you can't fight, just run away. This is the combat experience accumulated by Taoist Sahang for thousands of years. Don't worry about losing face or not, the key is to save your life. After all, my magic weapon was lost in a daze. If I rushed forward, what if it was also given away to me? Although he is very kind and compassionate, he can't sacrifice himself for others. Su Tong also didn't expect Taoist Sahang to run so fast and be thousands of miles away in the blink of an eye. If it were another time, Su Tong would definitely hunt him down, and he would invite this Bodhisattva to sit in his fairy furnace and show his friendship as a landlord. Turning around and rushing back, I saw that the battleship had been flanked in the battlefield, being flanked by both Buddhism and hell. There are already some demons among them who have climbed onto the battleship and started fighting with the players at close quarters. Seeing this, Su Tong frowned, and countless thoughts flew out and turned into purple sky thunder. For a moment, thousands of thunders enveloped the entire void. In a moment, deep purple thunder fell, forming a terrifying ocean of thunder and hitting the earth. Whether it was a Buddhist protector or a demon from hell, they suddenly turned into ashes in the lightning. The thunder light stretches for 300 miles, and the purple clouds illuminate the nine-layered sky. Unknown how many demons and protectors were defeated in the lightning, causing a vacuum to temporarily appear on the battlefield. On the battleship, the smell of blood and minced meat was mixed, and everyone got a moment of respite. There was only a moment of respite, and soon the enemies came quickly like a tide. All Su Tong can do is to constantly send out thoughts, send out infinite purple sky thunder, and at the same time use the power of time to accelerate time around the battleship. The consumption of this process is so great that even the third generation of gods cannot withstand such consumption. Fortunately, Su Tong has the thought-making technique inherited from the Nine Immortals' cauldron. As long as the source of thoughts is not damaged, the consumed thought energy will be continuously replenished. However, as time passed, Su Tong began to feel a little overwhelmed. At this time, the sky was torn apart by a golden light, and Su Tong's heart sank. The golden light seemed to open a door to the world, and a golden ancient chariot flew out, with a tall figure standing on it. Su Tong, according to the decree of the Emperor of Heaven, be captured quickly. The deafening roar was like the infinite power of heaven, and the words followed the law, making the nine heavens tremble, and the power of heaven turned into countless chains and wrapped around Su Tong. Su Tong swept away the sword, cut off the chain, and glanced coldly, "Who are you?" The golden ancient chariot rumbled and swooped down from the clouds. "I am Daobu Tianshizing Jun." The figure in front of him had messy black hair, bronze skin, and a strong and powerful figure. His whole body was shrouded in the golden light from the sky, like the Emperor of Heaven coming to the world. But it does have the head of a wild boar. In fact, this is not surprising, because Kixing Tianjun himself was born from Dumuyuanjun. Dumuyuanjun gave birth to a total of 9 children, the eldest son, Emperor Tianhuang, and the second son, Emperor Ziwei. The remaining 7 are the 7 heavenly star lords, who look like 7 little pigs. Therefore, Dumuyuanjun's Dharma body looks like 7 piglets pulling a cart. The man's eyes were like copper bells, shining with endless golden light. He stood on the chariot, holding a golden whip in his hand, and pointed it at Su Tong and whipped it down. A river of stars is surging, submerging the heaven and the earth. It is absolutely terrifying. The light covers the sky and the sun, making it difficult to look at it. Dao Kixing Jun is naturally one of the most righteous gods in the sky, a real boss in heaven, and one of the pinnacles of combat power among the 3 generations of gods. Su Tong's expression was extremely solemn. Thousands of thoughts flew out from the center of his brows, and he unfolded the star map again. He didn't want to waste time here. The teleportation array was about to end its cooldown, so he repeated his old trick and aimed the Wu-Chi divine light at it. Starlight shone in front of him. The starlight was brilliant, but it was directly penetrated by this ray of white light and dissipated into the invisible. Then Su Tong waved his hand and pointed, and the nebula behind him turned. Thousands of mirror-like thoughts quietly changed their angles, aiming the incompetent divine light at Tianshizing Jun's chariot. The divine light on the chariot disappeared, and it suddenly lost control and crashed straight into the ground in the distance. This time, Tianshizing Jun was also startled. He had never seen such a strange spell. For a moment, he fell into the distance with the chariot. Walk. Seeing this, Su Tong did not rush to pursue the victory. His mission was to reach the destination within the specified time, not to compete with these so-called 7-star lords. He put away his many magical powers and quickly returned to the battleship, activating the teleportation array again. The battleship disappeared without a trace in an instant. The next moment the battleship emerged from the void again, the surrounding world was filled with mist. The shouts of killing that originally filled the battlefield suddenly became quiet. Everyone stared at the gray and silent land around them with their eyes wide open, and they all held their breath. The huge mountain of Gigzu Mountain can be clearly seen in the distance. If there are no accidents, the next teleportation can directly reach the destination. Plop. Gao Zhou lay on the ground clutching his chest and casually threw a pill into his mouth. He no longer wanted to move. There were shocking wounds everywhere on his body. If it weren't for the body of the corpse immortal, I'm afraid he would be close to death by now. After other players determined that there seemed to be no danger here, they also sat down on the ground and gasped for air. There were heavy casualties, almost half of the players died in the battle just now, and the battleships were filled with corpses of players, demons, and guardians. What's going on here? Why does it look like there's no one there? Although everyone was resting, their tense heartstrings never relaxed for a moment. Looking at the surrounding environment, they inevitably began to murmur in their hearts. Su Tong looked around with his spiritual eyes. There was a deathly silence. It was terrifyingly quiet, but he could not see any trace of the gods. This situation also confused Su Tong. It is said that this is the central area of the battlefield, and the fighting should be more intense. Why is it so quiet? Something's wrong. Su Tong felt bad in his heart, and saw a wisp of thoughts flying from his fingertips. Then it transformed into a white lotus, suddenly lighting up the whole world. This is the secret technique of the seven sects, and it is also one of the few secret techniques taught to me by my master. Hanging lamp to light the road. As the light shines, the surrounding void suddenly begins to distort. What? Su Tong was startled and raised his hand to strike with sword energy. Boom! The sword light penetrated the air and cut a sword mark thousands of miles long on the ground. But it didn't hurt the strange thing he just noticed. Hearing the movement, everyone couldn't help but tense up again. They helped each other to stand up and looked around. An invisible thing floated around from time to time, but by the time people's eyes caught each other's shadow, it had disappeared again. Su Tong looked around with his magical eyes and the Kinkin, but found nothing. Now even Su Tong was starting to have some troubles. If you don't come out, then try this. When Su Tong saw this, he immediately summoned a dense collection of thoughts, which turned into a star map above his head. The beams formed by the incompetent divine light fell, illuminating the entire world around the battleship. I thought that no matter what the other party was, I knew that when it came into contact with the incompetent divine light, it would inevitably reveal its true form. However, what Su Tong never expected was that the blurry shadow in the light and shadow actually walked happily through the incompetent divine light. Not only was it not affected, but it seemed to be enjoying it. There. A player suddenly raised his hand and released a skill forward. However, the skill was annihilated by an invisible force in mid-air, and then there seemed to be a huge force that directly tore the player off the battleship. Ah! As the screams rang out, the player was instantly twisted by the huge force, as if he was thrown into some kind of die-casting machine. The bones in his body were shattered, blood flowed, and he was finally crushed into a ball like a ping-pong ball. After it was big and small, it exploded with a pop sound. Call. It seemed that the smell of blood stimulated this strange existence, and there was a tearing sound in the air. No, get out of here. Su Tong and others noticed something was wrong, but it was too late. In an instant, 6 or 7 players were swept up by this force. Su Tong swung ammo ran and struck with his sword, but the result was still like cutting on cotton. The power of time. He did not believe in evil, so he activated the law of time, and a time-disordered storm distorted the void, but even so, it still had no effect on it. Let me try. Gu Zibai activated his martial arts will and punched him. Instead of hitting anything, his fist was hit in the chest with a huge force and flew down. Now everyone was panicking. As a human immortal, Guzibai's martial arts will was enough to shatter the starry sky, but now his fists were unable to harm this thing, and he couldn't even touch it. The eldest princess, Gaozhou, Libo, even Master and Hagrid all kept trying various things, but the result was that there was no effect at all. Damn it, what on earth is this thing? It's so difficult to deal with. No wonder there isn't a single god in this ghost place. Gao Zhou cursed and swung the general's broken blade, and ended up chopping up Lonely. Don't even move. Suddenly, Aimee seemed to have thought of something, her pupils tightened, the skin and flesh on her body split, and she let out a sharp cry, causing everyone to stop moving. Su Tong turned around and saw that Aimee's face was pale, with tiny cracks appearing on her face. Such a situation would only occur when the Snow Clan's mood fluctuates the most. Su Tong thought that Aimee was frightened and wanted to step forward to comfort her, but when he moved a little bit, Aimee glared at her fiercely, "No move. Don't move." Now Su Tong didn't dare to move. Looking at Aimee, she didn't look like she was joking, so he quickly asked in a low voice, "Aimee, do you know what this is?" "Blame." Aimee looked around, and sure enough, in the originally empty wasteland, there were more and more weird substances, as if they were surrounding her from all directions. You can't see or touch them, but that doesn't stop you from feeling their existence. Aimee said softly, "A long time ago, the Kunlun Mountains were a green and vibrant mountain forest. At that time, there was a place called Qian. Just above this place was the Yaokai, which was the platform for the Yu clan and the place where other creatures were protected. The place where Yaokai was abandoned." Aimee always trembles unconsciously when she recalls Kunlun. Perhaps there are so many creatures that have died for thousands of years that there is a strange substance there, which is invisible and intangible, but will kill all creatures that come close. Even the Queen Mother of the West was once helpless. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Looking at each other for a moment, a feeling of impending disaster came over them. The Queen Mother of the West once made a special annotation for this thing in the history of gods, saying that this thing is an alternative way between heaven and earth. The thoughts of thousands of creatures can make one person become a god, and the resentment of thousands of creatures will also be transformed. Become an invisible substance to destroy everything in the world. Then how did Queen Mother 11 deal with this thing in the end? After hearing this, everyone understood that this kind of thing would appear too easily on a fierce battlefield like Gigzu Mountain. Once it appeared, they could only avoid it, and the gods would not dare to set foot on it easily. But since the Queen Mother of the West has recorded it, there must be a solution. Faced with everyone's gaze, Aimee ignored it and just looked at Su Tong quietly. Suddenly, Su Tong felt a bad feeling in his heart, and a familiar scene appeared in his mind. Before Su Tong could speak, Aimee suddenly laughed, "I wanted to wait for a while before I give it to you, but it's too late. It's under the pillow in the room and it's not finished yet. Don't laugh at me." Su Tong opened his mouth, but his throat seemed to be stuck and he couldn't make any sound. He knew that Aimee's fateful moment had arrived, and countless methods flashed through his mind, but at this moment, these methods had no effect at all in the face of fate. Queen Mother 11's way of dealing with resentment was to create the Snow Clan. Using the unique power of the Snow Clan, the entire Kunlun was turned into a land of cold snow, and the resentment was hidden under Kunlun by the snow. Along with the eternal glaciers, it will be frozen in that mountain forever. And Aimee's existence seems to be destined to wait for this moment. The big hand of fate seems to have already written the ending as early as the moment she was born. No matter how Su Tong goes around, he can't avoid this step. This is not only a beating for him, but also the biggest punishment for Su Tong's daring to disobey his fate. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. There are more and more invisible substances around. They gather together and become larger and larger. Everyone can feel the pervasive sense of oppression coming towards them. Unspeakable, incomprehensible, but I can feel their presence in every inch of my breath, like a rope, starting to wrap around my throat. Kakaka. Aimee slowly raised her arm, and instantly spiderweb-like cracks began to tear along her fingertips, revealing snow-white and crystal-clear flesh under the broken skin. Su Tong's heart almost burst when he saw this scene. He could feel the pain that Aimee, who had lost her skin, was enduring. This is where the Queen Mother of the West is cruel. She created the Snow Clan, who are elves in the ice and snow. But when they released their power, they lost the protection of their skin, and the crystal snowflakes danced, looking as beautiful as dandelions. Who would have thought that this process would be no less difficult for them than Ling Chi? But Aimee is smiling. There is no sadness about life and death, only encouragement for Su Tong. I will wait for you on the Nahi Bridge, even if it is for me, you must succeed. Good. Su Tong's heart was twitching, and he endured the stinging pain that penetrated his heart, and watched helplessly as Aimee's body turned into countless white snow. Call. Dots of snowflakes were falling in the sky, and when the snowflakes stained the ground, they quickly formed snow-white ice flowers on the ground. There seemed to be long and deep sighs in the air, and in the snowflakes, it seemed that the vague shadows could be seen fading away little by little. It seems that these white snowflakes have some magical power and are wearing away the invisible substance bit by bit. At the same time, during a period of time that should not have existed, the huge underworld was actually hiding in this period of time that should not have existed. This is a time in the future that should not exist. Even those gods who enjoy the great status of Genkuo are absolutely impossible to find. What's more, bringing this vast underworld together shows how powerful the methods are. There is also a white snow falling on Yushan Mountain. The cold wind howled from the top of the mountain, picking up thousands of ice and snow and scattering them to the vast underworld. On top of that peak, a pair of eyes were silently watching the world in front of them. Snowing. The goddess opened her palms and looked at the snowflakes falling on her palms. Her innocent face finally showed some worry. Will Brother Su succeed? Did you really give him the answer? The goddess walked to the edge of the cliff, looked at the figure sitting in front of the cliff, slowly raised her little foot, but after thinking about it, she still did not kick it out. The man sitting alone on the edge of the cliff reached out and picked up the teacup on the table. I never gave him an answer. I just gave him a pine nut. What kind of fruit he wants to bear depends entirely on his own wishes. Pine nuts. The goddess raised her head and glanced at the old pine tree behind her, her exquisite eyes full of curiosity. I tried to jump up to pick one out and look at it, but as soon as I jumped up, I was grabbed by a hand in mid-air. Looking back, he saw Fujun standing up from the cliff at some point, holding the goddess in his hand with a smile. Don't pick this randomly. If you take it off, no one else will have it in the future. When the goddess heard this, she immediately glared angrily at the bad guy in front of her. Put me down, let me down, huh, what are you doing bullying me? It's obviously all your fault, but you're hiding here drinking tea, reading, and being a coward. Goddess, shut up. Shuegui, Mr. Song, and the three men on the side heard the words and immediately shouted in unison. The three of them were sweating in their hearts. They knew that this goddess was bold, but they didn't expect that she would dare to say anything. However, Fujun didn't seem angry about this. Instead, he patted the little girl's head lovingly and put her on the ground. I can't give anyone the answer. Some things are destined, and the gods can't interfere. So the gods created players and used them to break the original rules. Because they are outsiders, they should not appear in the world and are anomalies, just like you used Brother Su. The words of the goddess once again made Shuegui and the others break into cold sweat on their foreheads. The girl's face was almost deformed, and she dared to look sideways at Fujun. But she saw that the face was blurry and she couldn't see anything at all. The level difference was too big, and she couldn't see clearly the true appearance of Fujun at this moment, let alone Fujun's expression. After a moment, Fujun let out a sigh, as if he couldn't control himself when the goddess directly exposed him like this. he simply picked up this little girl and threw it towards the cliff behind him. Ah! Following the scream of the goddess, the expressions of Shuigui and the others changed drastically, but they did not wait for them to move. A huge black dog jumped out from under the cliff, held the goddess in his mouth, and ran towards the city of Wushu without looking back. Not knowing where the goddess was carried by the black dog, the princess suddenly became anxious. But just as she was about to stand up, she suddenly felt her body sink, and a mountain-like pressure hit her hard. In her ears, she could only hear Fu Jun's voice, "Go down the mountain, with this order, but take out your body, and as for the goddess of heaven, don't look for her again in the future, otherwise." After hearing the next few words, Ba Nu's pupils tightened and she raised her head in surprise, but before she could say a single word, she was searched by Fu Jun's long sleeves and thrown out of Yushan Forbidden Palace. After falling out of the gate, the princess was stunned for more than 10 seconds, then raised her head in a daze, looking at the dragon top standing on the top of the Forbidden Palace in front of her with a face filled with disbelief. My whole body suddenly felt a chill, and I ran down the mountain without looking back, for fear that if I ran a step slower, I would die. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 1166. The world in front of me is covered by a vast expanse of white snow. Su Tong stood on the deck of the battleship, looking down at the world, feeling the ridicule of fate again in his heart. It seems to be saying that changing one's fate against the will of heaven is just a statement that people deceive themselves and others. No one can change what is destined, just as he can only watch his sister disappear, but can do nothing. It seems that from the day Ame was born, she was destined to exist for this moment. Everyone could sense Su Tong's inner emotions. Even Gao Zhou, who had the best relationship with Su Tong, did not dare to step forward rashly at this moment. Only the eldest princess could walk up to Su Tong and say, "The teleportation array is ready." Seeing that Su Tong did not respond, the eldest princess continued, "The next one may be me, or he may be him. Do you have to mourn like this every time?" Hiss. Su Tong took a deep breath. He knew that the eldest princess was right. His goal could only be to move forward and he would not be allowed to stop for a moment. Otherwise, everyone's sacrifices will be in vain. After adjusting his thoughts, Su Tong nodded, "Get ready to go." Corpses were thrown into the vitality furnace one after another, including players, Buddhas, and demons. Their corpses were the best materials. Especially the corpses of those demons were filled with a lot of evil energy. Su Tong specially extracted this energy from the vitality furnace and used Yan Shu to make talismans and distribute them to everyone. As long as you activate the talisman, you can quickly gain the power of the Hell Demon. This kind of power may have strong sequelae, but no one cares about whether they can survive the next second. As a large amount of energy in the vitality furnace began to flow into the teleportation array, the battleship jumped again. Hiss. The cracks in the space gradually began to become clearer. Before the warships could break out of the cracks, the roaring sounds of killing were already about to burst their eardrums. A great sword slashed through time and space, heading straight towards the battleship. The great sword has a simple shape, but it has a gorgeous golden texture that can cut through time and space and obliterate everything. There is no doubt that this is a rare magic weapon. The sword was shining with sacred light, which was obviously a method of the Holy See. They wanted to wipe out the battleship and the time and space before Su Tong and the others broke out of time and space. Su Tong's anger had nowhere to vent, but when he saw the sword light coming, he no longer suppressed it and completely exploded. The power of the years was shot out, rolling up the turbulence of time and space, causing the holy light on the sword to burst suddenly, and then launched the seizing art to seize the holy sword in the holy light in his hand. Buzz buzz. The holy sword trembled, still struggling to slash at Su Tong. Su Tong was even more annoyed when he saw this, because he had seen this holy sword in Gao Zhou's thread of fate, and it was the sword of the Archangel Gabriel. In the thread of Gao Zhou's fate, it was this guy who pierced Gao Zhou with his sword and burned his body to ashes. Thinking of this, brilliant starlight appeared behind Su Tong, and as the thoughts in the nebula turned, a ray of energyless divine light shone directly on the holy sword. Suddenly, the holy sword that had been fiercely resisting Su Tong stopped moving. The sacred power on it disappeared, revealing that the sword's body was a stone sword. I just don't know what kind of material it is made of, but when the stone is struck, there is a sound of diamond collision. Su Tong threw it directly into the vitality furnace with his backhand. Without the blessing of the holy light, even the holy sword would be decomposed into pure vitality by the vitality furnace. Traitor, destroy my holy sword. An extremely angry roar sounded in the void, and just as the battleship rushed out of the space tunnel, it came towards the battleship with a holy light that could destroy a world. Facing the figure that was chasing him, Su Tong only had cold killing intent in his eyes. Thousands of nebulae flashed behind him, and wisps of incompetent divine light were like thousands of beams of light, shining on the holy light in front of him. Suddenly, the dazzling holy light disappeared in an instant, and even Gabriel, who was swooping in front, was shocked. It was too late to escape, and countless rays of light shone directly on her body. What is this? Gabriel thought it was some kind of terrifying supernatural power at first, but he found that the light shining on his body did not harm him at all. She thought it was a feint from the opponent, but Gabriel soon became extremely frightened by this beam of light. Her divine power quickly dissipated in the strong light, and the wings behind her that symbolized strength and status were quickly corrupted by the light. Disappear. In an instant, he transformed from a supreme god to an ordinary mortal. The feeling of losing power like this was even more uncomfortable than killing him. Before Gabriel could recover from the fear of losing his power, Su Tong's figure had already appeared beside him, his fingers wrapped around her slender throat, and he immediately pressed her body and smashed it to the ground. Boom, the ground exploded, all the bones in Gabriel's body were smashed, and his originally holy face was smashed to pieces. An ordinary person would have been dead long ago, but not only did Gabriel not die, he was even conscious and screamed to the sky, "Holy light is everywhere." Just listen to the misty and light fairy music in the sky, countless angels are reciting hymns, and the majestic fire of faith like the ocean converges into a beam of light and falls on Gabriel's body. Gabriel, who was bathed in the fire of faith, once again had 6 pairs of golden wings appearing behind her. Her huge divine power made the whole world tremble. Her body was glowing and crystal clear, and the wounds on her body healed instantly. He stared at Su Tong fiercely. In all these years, no one had ever made him so embarrassed, let alone a player with a mortal background. Not convinced? Then I'll beat you until you are convinced. Su Tong narrowed his eyelids and treated friends, relatives, and even players who were temporarily on the same front as him, he could treat them like a spring breeze and never care about personal gains and losses. But facing the enemy, Su Tong was ruthless and would never give the opponent a chance to breathe. Before Gabriel could take action, streaks of energyless divine light fell down. The divine light cut off the fire of faith with one sweep, and then swept it again, turning Gabriel into a mortal again. These methods made several heavenly kings watching the battle from a distance stunned. Gabriel was even more angry to the point of hysteria. She had never seen such a strange ability before, and she cursed Su Tong angrily. With a wave of Su Tong's big hand, countless sword energy fell like a torrential rain, instantly cutting the archangel into human sticks on the spot. Blood spattered on the ground, and Gabriel let out a scream like a slaughtering pig in pain. Su Tong grabbed her long golden hair and held it in his hand. He looked around, his eyes full of bloodshot eyes, and killed her coldly. Everyone watching the battle was moved. Who else? The angry roar suddenly silenced the originally chaotic battlefield, and countless gods felt frightened. On the other side of the heaven, 300 righteous gods looked sideways and were even more frightened when they saw this scene. The strength of the heaven-defying lineage has been extremely terrifying since ancient times. Many gods among them had met Su Tong in Kunlun Mountain. At that time, this boy was so powerful that they could crush each other to death with one finger. In just a short time, Su Tong's growth has reached a point where they feel deeply threatened. Halfway up the mountainside of Gigzu Mountain, I saw Ni Shen holding his arms, as if he was looking coldly at Du Xiren's army in front of him. Although 2 arms were missing from his hands, even with only 2 pairs of arms left, it still hasn't changed its former glory. At this moment, he was attracted by this roar. When he saw it was Su Tong, Nishan's eyes flashed with light, and when he noticed that this boy was holding Gabriel in his hands like a dead dog, a smile appeared on his lips. As expected of a prisoner's son, his appearance is somewhat similar to his father's domineering attitude back then. This couldn't help Ni Shen feeling a little nostalgic in his heart, as if the boy in front of him was his old rival. When he thought of this, Ni's eyes gradually became sharper, and his face showed a sickly distortion. However, after looking at it again and again, he finally shook his head and suppressed the desire in his heart. Unfortunately, he is not a prisoner. Compared with a prisoner, he is a little more tender. He deserves to be compared with prisoners. A displeased snort appeared behind Nishan. Nishan knew who it was without looking back. He curled his lips and said, "Even if he is no better than the prisoner, I think it would not be difficult for him to kill you." "What?" The man behind him let out a strange cry, walked forward quickly, and stared at Su Tong fiercely. I saw a strange-looking man, with eagle eyes, a pig's nose, and a tiger's mouth and wolf fangs. This man was called a wolf, and he was one of the ancient dead gods who resurrected from the underworld together with Nishan and others. His strength is far inferior to Tai, Nishan, and others, but no one dares to deny his fighting power. Hearing Nishan's words, Lu's eyes were particularly ferocious, and he looked Su Tong up and down. "Is it just him? If you don't believe it, you can go and give it a try, but don't blame me for not reminding you that Kong's Kinkan time stick is in his hand." Lu, who was still ready to make a move, suddenly turned bitter when he heard that the Kinkan Shaoguang was in Su Tong's hand, cursed and turned around to leave. He was not afraid of Su Tong's strange divine light, but he was afraid of the Kinkan time stick. This thing was so unnatural that it was like a nemesis to him. God knows how this idiot Kong lost this thing. Let's go. Tianyu is about to leave seclusion. No matter whose son he is then, he will be nothing more than a sacrifice on the altar. It's a pity. If he could be with us in the eternal world, maybe he could regain his majestic appearance. Ni's feelings towards Su Tong are very complicated. It's not that he simply likes this boy, but that he wants to find the shadow of Qi in Su Tong. For him, not being able to kill the prisoner with his own hands is an eternal regret in his life. This regret will bring him endless torture in the years to come. But he saw hope in Su Tong. The stronger Su Tong became and the closer he came to the prisoner's power, the more he couldn't help but want to kill him and fill him with this regret. Kill it. Su Tong stood on the deck of the battleship, pointing his finger forward. Under the huge mountain, 2 dragon-like mountains lie on both sides, revealing a huge valley plain in the middle. Looking from a distance, one can see the figure of the Hades army and Du Xiren's handsome flag. Now that the teleportation array is no longer needed, the energy of the Yuankai divine furnace is quickly injected into the Sun battleship, causing the battleship to move and forcefully rush across the battlefield to join the Hades army. Facing these warriors of all races rushing towards the battleship, Su Tong swept his incompetent divine light towards them. With one sweep of the divine light, he directly reduced them all to mortals. Immediately after the warship opened fire, the vitality cannons fired wildly at the surroundings. With the blessing of Su Tong's time law, the cooling time of the vitality bubbles was extremely short. From the outside, it only took 5 or 6 seconds for a cannon to hit. The warriors of all races who have lost their divine power are no different from mortals. When a shot is fired, their flesh and blood will be scattered, and their muscles and bones will be separated. You betrayed heaven, what can you get? It's just a vacant position. The gods have already reached an agreement, including Hades. You chose the wrong team and you are destined to die badly. Gabriel, who was held by Su Tong, glared at Su Tong and kept provoking him. Su Tong knew what she was planning, it was just to attract his attention and take the opportunity to negotiate terms with him. It's just that Gabriel underestimated Su Tong's methods, and saw his fingers gently lifting the lines of fate on Gabriel's body. A flash of thought made Gabriel's fate clear in an instant. As one of the 7 archangels, Gabriel is definitely at the highest level in heaven. Although his status cannot be compared with Michael, he is the one closest to God in the West. Through her fate, Su Tong saw the gods in heaven and Du Ziren. This was a meeting that took place a long time ago, before the god of death was resurrected. And the people attending this meeting all represent bigwigs from one world. Gabriel and the other 7 archangels could only stand at the outermost edge. I could barely see the figures of the big guys through the crystal partition. Su Tong looked through her perspective and couldn't clearly see the figures of these big guys. However, it can be vaguely guessed from the vague outlines that among them there is the figure of Fajun, Queen Mother of the West, the Lord of Heaven, Shiva from ancient India, etc. They are all ancient second-generation gods, part of mythology. Source: the people gathered together at this moment seem to be discussing how to deal with the resurrection of the dead god in the future. They had already been aware of the resurrection of the dead gods, and in this meeting, they seemed to have reached a consensus on certain aspects. Su Tong really wanted to hear what they were talking about, but the crystal screen in front of them completely blocked their conversation, and even their figures were blurred. It was completely impossible to see their mouth shapes and read their lips. Therefore, although Gabriel and other 3 generations of gods surrounded the surroundings tightly, no one could know what they were talking about. What on earth are they discussing? Su Tong retracted his thoughts, and his heart was suddenly filled with a haze. Although Gabriel's words were not confirmed, these big guys were all the masters of the world. They once overthrew the rule of the Age of Death gods. Although there were factors of the times, it was undeniable that they were the victors who had the last laugh. If we really want to describe them, we can only say that these big guys are the champions of the last battle of gods. Ha ha ha, you and I are just pawns. Do you really think that everything you know, think, and see is what you think? Do you think that you are in control of your life? Don't be stupid, each of us is their chosen chess piece. Do you think that the 6 paths of reincarnation in the underworld are just mercy? What are you going to do? Stop. When Gabriel was talking, he suddenly found that Su Tong was carrying him towards the direction of the vitality furnace. Looking at the hot furnace mouth of the vitality furnace, Gabriel suddenly panicked. She just wanted to negotiate terms with Su Tong and wanted this guy to let her go. Even as a chess piece, he is the queen in Western chess and the chariot, horse, and cannon in Eastern chess. She still wants to live, but she hasn't lived enough yet. Stop, I still have a lot of secrets to exchange. The gods don't care about reality and the mirror world at all. They are all selfish devils. We are now sacrifices under a feast. Seeing Gabriel twisting his body desperately and begging for mercy, Su Tong couldn't feel any mercy. Throwing it forward casually, Gabriel's body was immediately thrown into the vitality furnace. He didn't know how deep the water was inside, but he didn't need someone like Gabriel to remind him. The divine furnace of vitality tore at Gabriel's body, and even though his divine power was temporarily reduced by the incompetent divine light, Gabriel's soul and thoughts did not really disappear, but were only temporarily suppressed. As these divine powers were torn apart and transformed by the Yuankai divine furnace, huge power suddenly penetrated the entire Yuankai battleship, causing the battleship's speed and firepower to undergo earth-shaking changes in an instant. Coupled with Su Tong's incompetent divine light, which continued to sweep around, the battleship almost charged a bloody path through the armies of all races. The army of Hades has begun to rush forward one after another to meet Su Tong. Du Ziren had even taken action himself, but as soon as he moved, someone would intervene to stop him. You must know that there are too many eyes staring at Du Ziren. It was all because of Fujun's change. The Queen Mother of the West had summoned him repeatedly, but in the end, he simply threw Du Ziren out and then hit it directly. This guy made the gods sleepless and uneasy. Among the second-generation gods, he was the most forbearing. In order to fight for the underworld, all the forces fought hard, but in the end, they were not able to truly hold the underworld in their hands. The natives of the underworld fought back wildly, and due to the special nature of that place, the second-generation gods were not willing to get involved easily. Only then did he seize the opportunity and strike out forcefully. Before even the gods could recover, he wiped out the entire underworld. Afterwards, many people even suspected that this was the situation set by Fujun early. The Bian Emperor seemed to have colluded with Fujun early on, so he surrendered as soon as Fujun entered the underworld. When the gods wanted to intervene in the underworld, this guy played a game of vertical and horizontal alliances, pulling the two families of Buddhism and Taoism into it, creating the underworld, guarding reincarnation, and living in the secluded mountains. From then on, it seemed that he could not escape, but in fact he was everywhere. Balance, mastery of power, firmly holding the power in hand. Now that Du Ziren was brought out with one kick and he was hidden again, it was difficult for even the gods to figure out what this guy was thinking. This was also the reason why Du Ziren asked Su Tong to come in from the side instead of following the main force. For the two of them to be together, the risk is too great, and it will further stimulate the nerves of the gods. As soon as Du Ziren moved, the nine heavens were suddenly torn apart by a ray of Buddha's light, and the mighty power of faith rumbled like a river flowing. Immediately after a powerful aura erupted, a barefoot fell from the sky and stepped on Du Ziren head-on. Ha 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 ha. The Buddha's big foot stepped down accompanied by Lang Lang's laughter, causing the heaven and earth to collapse. Du Ziren took a closer look and sneered, Maitreya, let alone the future Buddha, even if the Tathagata comes in person, I can still poke a hole in you today. Du Ziren's face was full of murderous intent, and he held a sail of the gods in his left hand. When he waved the long sail, the names of thousands of gods appeared on it. He has been collecting the thoughts of the gods, not just to make figures and collect them for fun. In fact, besides the master, there are many people who are collecting the thoughts of the gods for him. Many Taoist priests in the past who were related to the underworld had an inseparable relationship with him, especially Taoist Mai Hua. Unfortunately, Taoist Mai Hua was too shrewd and discovered that the water inside was too deep. In addition, he was proficient in Yinshu, and after realizing the horror of cause and effect, he made a big fuss in the underworld and finally got a chance to jump out of the chessboard. At this moment, the thoughts of the gods were entangled on the divine sail. With Du Ziren's wave, thousands of divine lights suddenly hit Maitreya's big feet. The big foot in the sky exploded directly, and the fire of faith suddenly exploded. Then I saw Du Ziren holding a long sword, manifesting the Dharma, and killing Maitreya. Du Ziren was fighting against the Buddhist Maitreya, and Su Tong was also fighting fiercely. A divine light fell from the sky, and he was not afraid of Su Tong's incompetent divine light and went straight to kill him. When the Wookiee divine light swept over, it was directly swept away by the five-color strange light flashing around the opponent. The visitor looks like gold reflecting fire, wearing bright armor, holding a jade sword, and a majestic red horse under his crotch. Even Su Tong was frightened by the powerful attack. This person is none other than Kongxian, king of the Ming dynasty, the top warrior in Buddhism and the #1 god among the 3 generations in myths and legends. Compared with Kongxian's 5-color divine light, the non-energy divine light is not advantageous at all. It is even far inferior to Kongxian's 5-color divine light in terms of convenience and functionality. Just when Su Tong was about to rush forward and fight him, Gu Zibai had already jumped past him. If you get entangled with him, we will all die. Take everyone forward and charge Kongxian to me. As he said this, Gu Zibai jumped up and ran straight towards Kongxian, knowing that the gap between the two was huge, but at this time, Gu Zibai was already ready to die. Su Tong's expression suddenly changed and it was too late to stop him. He gritted his teeth and could only speed up the battleship forward. Looking at Gu Zibai's spine, the keel was bulging, and the huge blood was like a golden flame, the flames reaching into the sky. At this moment, Gu Zibai burned all the blood in his body to gain the qualification to fight Kongxian. Tears flashed in the corners of Su Tong's eyes, and he could hardly hold back any longer. His friends and lovers were rushing towards death one by one, but he was powerless and could only watch helplessly, with no one to tell him about the torment in his heart. Old Bai, kill him. Gao Zhou roared at Gu Zibai with heartbreak and shouted for Gu Zibai, see you on the road to Huangquan. Gu Zibai was stunned for a moment, turned his head and gave a thumbs up to everyone, and immediately used his immortal power to the extreme, punching Kongxian's figure. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 1168. With a mortal body, standing side by side with gods, Gu Zibai, as a human immortal, would be enough to be recorded in the annals of history and achieve immortality in any era. At this moment, he exploded into his strongest state, accompanied by a roar like a dragon or a tiger, which made all the gods in the sky moved. After this battle, Gu Zibai's name was enough to leave an indelible impression in front of the gods and Buddhas. Some gods even regretted in their hearts that if the world of this era had not come to an end, even if Gu Zibai died in this battle, he would still have a chance to gain the title of god. Compared to Gu Zibai's roar, the vision of Su Tong and others was already blurred. Whether it is players or gods, there is something they cannot change, and that is equal exchange. Gu Zibai's outburst at this moment was just a short-lived spark in exchange for his own life. No matter what the outcome of this battle was, Gu Zibai was destined to be burned to ashes in his own martial arts holy fire. This was a result that Su Tong could not change. The only thing they could do was to rush over. All the players on the battleship are fighting with all their strength. They don't expect to be able to persist to the end, but as long as Su Tong can be sent over, it is a victory for them. But the gods obviously wouldn't let Su Tong rush over like this. A talisman light sprinkled down from the sky, and the talisman gave off a soft light. Thousands of auspicious lights sprinkled down like a heavy rain. Su Tong used Wuki divine light to shine in the past, and suddenly thousands of talismans gradually disappeared in the light, but the faces of everyone were extremely ugly. The overwhelming talismans were like a tsunami, covering the sky and the earth. Although there was no Qi divine light, they couldn't hold back the overwhelming number of talismans, and they almost smashed the warship into pieces. Boom! The infinite talismans hit the ground hard, forming a world of apricot talismans, surrounding the battleship from all directions. Although the incompetent divine light can be seen to dissolve the talismans, no matter how many times it is swept, the number of talismans still does not decrease, but becomes more and more. Only then did Su Tong notice the mysteriousness of these talismans. 2, 2, 3, and 3 gave rise to all things. They were endless and difficult to escape. This is the method. With all the experience of the gods in the heaven, many gods of the third generation may not recognize the divine light without energy. But those 3 generations of older gods know the origin of this method. Know that this ray of strange light is the ray of divine light that kills all gods and spirits when the world reopens. When the dead gods used the altar to reopen the world of feng shui and fire, an occasional ray of strange light was preserved, and was eventually sealed away in the heavenly enlightenment cliff. After all, this thing is too domineering, the nemesis of the gods, and difficult to control, so no one even thinks about it. But he didn't expect that this thing would fall into Su Tong's hands and be controlled by him. But even if this is the case, there are still ways to deal with him. As the saying goes, quantity creates quality. As long as the quantity is large enough, even ants can kill an elephant. Even if they can't kill Su Tong, it is easy to trap him here. A large number of talismans poured down, and the sun battleship was like a small boat in the waves, and it would be torn apart by the stormy waves transformed by the talismans at any time. "Old Ma, can we still use the teleportation array?" Gao Zhou shouted. "They can't hold on for long now. If they can't find a way out as soon as possible, the ship will be destroyed and everyone will be killed. Su Tong won't be able to save so many people. It's useless, it can't be teleported at all." No need for Master to answer, the eldest princess made Gao Zhou and others give up the idea. These talismans were from the hands of the Taoist ancestor, Lingbao Tianzun. If they could struggle out, there would be no need for Master's teleportation array. The eldest princess would have torn open the void to take them out. At this point, the eldest princess can only release the infinite black water. With the ability of the billowing black water to corrode everything, she can barely stabilize the battleship, but it may be difficult to rush out. Su Tong frowned. He still had some trump cards to play. For example, Heavenly Prisoner and the title of Xian Shen were enough to allow him to take the eldest princess, Gao Zhou, Li Bo, and Master away with him. But what about other players? Although they were ready to die here, Su Tong could not abandon them at this time. Such an act was something Su Tong could not do. This is not only a torture of one's own conscience, but also a surrender to fate. But his other methods have no key effect here. Even if the 9 Immortals' cauldron could protect them for a while, they couldn't break free from here. Just when Su Tong didn't know what to do, his ears suddenly moved, and he vaguely seemed to hear something. Not only Su Tong, but Gao Zhou and others also heard the buzzing sound as the sound got louder and louder. Huh? Who is setting off fireworks? After Li Bo finished speaking, everyone rolled their eyes. What the hell are fireworks? The sound was more like an explosion. One after another, there was a steady stream of explosions. Did someone come to save us? Everyone was filled with joy, but they couldn't figure out who would come to save them at this time. It's them. Suddenly, Su Tong frowned, as if he had guessed who it was, and his mood suddenly became complicated. Boom boom boom. As the sound of the explosion got closer and closer, Su Tong immediately commanded the battleship, "Quick, charge forward." For a moment, Master pushed all the energy in the vitality furnace to the thruster at the tail end of the battleship, causing the battleship to rush straight forward. The ocean of sky-covering talismans crashed down with a roar that destroyed the heaven and earth. Su Tong responded with his incompetent divine light. However, there were too many talismans and the two formed a stalemate. If the warship collided with him at this time, he would definitely be killed by the enemy in front of him. The talisman was smashed into pieces. Just rush. Su Tong raised Mo Ran and pointed his sword forward, asking everyone to grab whatever they could around them. Open it. Su Tong split time and space with his sword with all his strength, creating a crack in the talisman in front of him. At least such a crack was almost negligible for the endless talismans. Everyone stared with wide eyes as the rapidly healing cracks became smaller and smaller, and the muscles all over the body tensed to the extreme. It's over, it's too late. The rift healed faster than any of them thought. Shua. Just when the crack was about to heal, a snow-white figure suddenly crashed in from the other side of the talisman. Everyone could see clearly that it was the white deer fairy they met before. When their eyes met, Fairy Bailu just nodded slightly, and then a bright light burst out from her chest and suddenly illuminated the whole world. The immortal self-destruct. It was an insignificant little immortal like Bailu Fairy, but the power accumulated over the long years was terrifying once it exploded. The intense white light suddenly penetrated the surrounding talismans, burning a huge hole. This seems to be an ending that no one expected, but it is not the end, but rather a beginning. The moment the battleship rushed out along the crack opened by Fairy Bailu, the eyes of everyone on the battleship were red. I saw a steady stream of mythical beasts rushing into the talisman and exploding themselves. Some of these mythical beasts were mounts of gods, and some were spirit beasts raised in captivity by the heaven. Su Tong even saw the Qingke clan who once broke into the Tianmen. The densely packed Qingke tribe swooped into the sea of talismans. They were very small, and hundreds of Qingke tribesmen suddenly gathered together and started to self-destruct. Boom boom boom. The deafening roars not only helped Su Tong and the others to blast their way forward, but also responded to the roars of the slaves of the gods for thousands of years. The shocking and tragic picture ignited the anger in everyone's hearts. Kill. The moment the battleship broke out of the talisman encirclement, it was met by warriors from all races rushing forward. Su Tong summoned the Faxiang heaven and earth and led everyone to kill them all. A large swath of the underworld army was also crushing down in a mighty manner at this moment, and a bloody path was opened for Su Tong and others. Seeing the warships rushing into the underworld army crookedly, the originally attacking heavenly soldiers and generals began to withdraw like a tide. Live, we survived. Some people cried with joy, and some collapsed on the deck. No one thought that they could survive. But after a burst of ecstasy, what greeted him was a face full of confusion, and his dull eyes looked at the corpse on the deck. There were hundreds of players before departure, plus Ge Zhou and other warriors, and 500 nightmare cavalry, which amounted to thousands of people. Nowadays, there are no more than 10 people left. Zhang Shi and the 500 nightmare cavalry were washed away after the first teleportation, and they were submerged in the darkness with the 500 nightmare cavalry. Su Tong found part of Ge Zhou's body in the pile of corpses, and there were not many soldiers left around him. Even the battleship under their feet was already crumbling and could break at any time. But what was gained at such a painful price was not victory on the battlefield. When the battleship quickly moved along the valley, he saw Xie and Fan Bie standing there at the end of the quiet valley, waiting for him. When they saw Su Tong and others approaching, the two of them looked at each other and couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. I finally came. The two of them stepped forward and took out from their sleeves the order flag that Du Ziren had left for Su Tong. This was the last military order. Going further ahead, there is a stone door in the hinterland of Gigzu Mountain. After opening it, you can enter the altar. Please destroy the altar. Military orders sound simple, but are they really that simple? Su Tong stretched out his hand to take the military order expressionlessly. If there is anything else you want to say, let's say it all. We may not have the chance to see each other again. As soon as Su Tong said these words, Xie and Fan Bie looked sad. Fan Bie opened his mouth, but in the end he couldn't say anything. Seeing how entangled he was, Xie took the initiative to speak for him, but she just told a story. When the gods first wanted to occupy the mirror world, they found that there were some things that even they couldn't change. The mirror world was just like the past. Even though the gods had supreme power, they could destroy a world. But they couldn't occupy these worlds as they wanted. It wasn't until they discovered that those humans could be brought into the mirror world by them and became the key to changing the original direction of the world that there were players. This story is not new, but Xieqi's story has her own reasons for being mentioned again at this moment. She pointed at her feet. This is also part of the mirror world. Su Tong's pupils tightened, and he probably understood what Xieqi meant, and nodded to her to express his gratitude. Then Xieqi and Fan Bie both cupped their hands and said, "Farewell, please don't forget me. I still owe you a drink."